Okay, guys, I think we got our quorum, and so we can get started. And we're going to start with Senate Bill 189, Senator Lewis Young here. And why don't we do this? You have a sponsor panels. Can I bring them up? And well, let's start with our Lieutenant Governor, my number one favorite constituent, former district mate.
Don't tell your wife.
Correct. That's a good point. Okay, we've got Lieutenant Governor Miller, Erica Kearns, Eddie Godwin, and Mayor of Mount Airy, Larry Hushore, are the four sponsor panelists. Is that right,
Yes,
Senator?
that's correct.
Okay, so why don't we, you're going to take the time you need to present Senate Bill 189, and then we'll go to your panel, and then after that, we'll take questions, and then we'll move to other witnesses, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon.
And by the way, welcome back to your old committee.
You beat me to saying good to be back. Good afternoon, committee, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. Good to be back, maybe not under these circumstances, but this is the kind of bill that inspires what we do and why we do it. Mason's Law, SB 189. On July 31st of this past year, tragedy struck the Kearns family when Mason Kearns perished in a flash flood. His family is here today to tell you what happened and how it could have been prevented. And that's essentially what this bill is about, how to prevent this from happening in the future. The bill requires municipalities to construct or install approved grading systems on a new or existing open drainage inlet. On August the 25th, 5-year-old Zariah Miller died after she was swept into a storm drain in Sarasota, Florida, less than a month away. What happened to Mason and Zariah are not isolated incidents. ProPublica reported in 2021 that at least 36 people in a 6-year period across the country had lost their lives from being swept into storm drains. My staff and I have worked closely with the Kearns family, the mayor of Mount Airy, and the town engineer to come up with the language in this bill. We understand that there are some concerns about the timing of implementation and potential costs, and we're willing to work with the municipalities to define a realistic implementation timeline and to prioritize the most vulnerable locations. However, Mount Airy has already taken the lead in corrective action. They have already surveyed 2,000 drains in their community. They found 24 loose grates, 13 drains in need of trash racks, 4 collapsed drains, and 7 places in need of signage. Now, I mention this because in 6 months, they have already done the survey, identified corrective action. Also, I want to point out for those municipalities concerned about costs that things like placing more signage or loose grate repair is not as costly as the other 2 items. And I mention that because the fiscal note cites remedial action at anywhere between $1,500 and $2,000. So that wouldn't be applicable. But the numbers I just quoted to you, the total 48 that are in need of some kind of corrective action, that's 2.4% of all drains and inlets. So we're not talking about redoing or correcting everything. So that is an overview. The family will tell you the story and their crusade for corrective action throughout the state. The mayor of Mount Airy will tell you about his dedicated experience to remediating the cause. And I ask you all to join me, the family, the town of Mount Airy, in making this statewide policy so that it doesn't happen again. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Do you have a sequence? You want to,
Yes,
Ms. Kearns, the Lieutenant Governor?
Lieutenant Governor is next.
Okay,
Thank you.
Lieutenant Governor Miller, you take the time you need to present Senate Bill 189.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chair Feldman. It's good to be testifying before you today as your constituent. And always good to see you, Vice Chair Kagan, and all the members of EEE Committee. I don't know, do you have a quick acronym for this? EEE, okay. I heard E cubed, but I'll go with EEE. I'm Aruna Miller, Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, and I'm here to testify in strong support of Senate Bill 189, Mason's Law. Before anything else, let me offer my deepest condolences to Mason's brother Clay, his parents Erica, Chip, his aunt Allison, his grandparents, and all his extended family, and everyone who loved him. On July 31st, 2025, Mason, just 13 years old, lost his life after being swept into an unprotected storm drain. About a month later, I joined Mayor Hushhour of Mount Airy to be with Mason's family and the community in their grief. It was heartbreaking. No words nor time can ease that loss, but our actions can honor Mason's life. So let me thank Senator Karen Lewis Young for her leadership and her care in sponsoring this legislation. Senate Bill 189 requires Maryland municipalities to construct or install an approved grading system over an open drainage inlet, allowing stormwater to flow as designed without putting lives at risk. This is not punitive, but it is preventative. I know that there is a cost to making these improvements, and I want to be honest about that. But the cost of doing nothing comes at a tragic price. At its heart, Senate Bill 189 is about protecting Marylanders. It's about working together across state and local lines to reduce risk and make infrastructure safer for everyone. And we also know that education is a significant part of prevention. That means raising awareness through clear signage, thoughtful public safety messaging, and community outreach to help residents understand the dangers storm drains can pose during heavy rain. As you heard from Senator, this is not an anomaly. This is happening far more frequently across our country. And with climate change and flooding happening at a faster rate, this is happening. So any type of education that we can offer to the community would be greatly, greatly improved. To our local government partners, let us work together to find solutions that protect our communities while recognizing local capacity. I urge the committee for a favorable report on Senate Bill 189. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Who's going to go next? Mayor?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Am I okay with 3 minutes or something?
Actually, on this one, we're not going to clock you. You guys
Okay.
take the time you need.
All right, then I'll go ahead and read it in its entirety. Prior to July 31st of 2025, I would have never imagined Mount Airy as a municipality vulnerable to flash flooding. We sit on the first ridge line of the Blue Ridge Mountains. We exist at an elevation of 800 feet. Known as Pars Ridge, it is so steep that the B&O Railroad had to tunnel beneath our town just to clear the ridge line. July 31st, 2025, changed my mind. I learned, and we all learned, that flash flooding doesn't care about elevations. On that evening, Mount Airy experienced a torrential downpour. Some rain gauges reported over 5 inches of rain flooded down in a 3-hour period. Our storm ponds overflowed. Our sewer caps were literally popping from the ground due to infiltration, and stormwater drain inlets became whirlpools that enticed nearby kids to approach with fascination, never realizing the dangers that they presented. One 18-inch pipe under an entry road to an apartment complex had existed for decades with hardly even a purpose. Residents said they only saw a trickle go through that pipe for as long as they lived there. But on July 31st, the storm pond above this pipe rose to an unprecedented level and began spilling down a troughed area and created a whirlpool. Young Mason got too near it and got sucked into it. There was no escape. There was no ability to rescue him. 3 grown men and neighbors could not free Mason from the suction that was created by this inlet. As a result and in response to the incident on July 31st, Mount Airy set out to inspect every stormwater pipe in our town of roughly 5 square miles. Our town of 10,000 people had 31 housing developments, several churches, 4 schools, carnival grounds, parks, commercial areas, and a downtown to inspect. That gave us 1,256 inlets, basically half of the number of pipes that we had when you talk about the exits as well. This took our engineering department of 2 persons, 5 months to complete. 450 in-house hours were required to complete the task. This cost at a $50 per hour, which is our standard rate for staff engineering services, equates to about $22,500. Realize these drains are on HOA properties, town properties, school board properties, nonprofit properties, private properties, and yes, apartment complexes. Inspections can be tedious, and the remediation can most certainly be tedious, and someone certainly has to pay the bill for all of this. We are fortunate in Mount Airy. We'll find a way to get it done. Other municipalities will not be able to absorb such costs. They'll have some problems with it. We estimate that our total remediation, and this is not just the pipes that are similar to Mason's scenario, but the other problems that we found along the way that Senator Young mentioned, would be around $76,800 if it's contracted out. We'll do some things in-house. This remediation will include the following from our assessment. We found a total, as the senator said, of 49 issues. Not all were similar to the hazard that claimed Mason's life. As for the apartment complex where Mason passed away, the 18-inch pipe inlet was replaced by a yard inlet drain, and that was paid for at the owner's expense. We found 13 other inlets that could have trash rack grading. These are the ones that are similar to those of the flash flooding scenario of July 31st, and that would be approximately $50,000 of the $76,000 I mentioned earlier in cost. In addition, we found 24 loose grates, 4 collapsed drains, and 7 areas that would benefit from the flash flood warning signs. Following the tragic incident, I notified my fellow mayors and burgesses in Carroll and Frederick County, we split the 2 counties, to take a cursory look at their town drains, and many of them did so. And I am extremely grateful to Lieutenant Governor Aruna Miller for taking the time to come and see the site of the incident for herself, comfort the family, and bring attention to the hazard that exists nationwide. She also healed our town. Maryland leads. Please pass Mason's Law with amendments for municipality funding, an extended time for full remediation, and clarifying language on the drains that need to be remediated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Kearns?
Good afternoon. My name is Erica Kearns. I am the mother of Mason Paul Kearns, and I would like to thank you for reviewing this bill today for Mason's Law and for allowing myself and my family the opportunity to testify here today. When I gave permission for my 15 and 13-year-old sons to play outside in the heavy rain and puddles, I didn't know I would be making the worst decision of my life. I didn't know I would never see one of them again. Mason was sucked into a drainage pipe, trapped underwater in our over front yard. And I'll spare you the events of the next 45 minutes before the water was drained and Mason was finally freed. I can't talk about it. Anyways, I can't think about it. I can't accept the fact that he's gone. And I can't describe the gut-wrenching, heart-shattering feeling I get with just the thought. It's indescribable. And it'll be like that forever. Mason was kind, funny. He made friends wherever he went. He loved dogs. He loved to skateboard. He loved to help others. And Mason will never experience life past 13. And our family will now forever suffer that void. And as a mother, my heart will forever be broken. But there is one thing I know. Mason had a purpose in his life, and maybe saving others is that purpose. We can't change what happened. Nothing will bring him back, but we can make sure that this doesn't happen again. I am asking you, please, to pass Mason's Law, which would require drainage pipes that pose a threat to the public be graded, be fixed so that they're not. And really, it's a common sense safety. It's like a seatbelt or pool fences. Please do this for my son and every other child, person, and family in our state. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kearns. Mr. Godwin?
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Eddie Godwin, lieutenant in Carroll County in the fire service. That day I was a lieutenant at Mount Airy where I volunteer. It's a day I will never forget, and what I would like to share with you is my experience that afternoon. One that I can relive and spent most of the night thinking about, knowing I was coming here to speak of it because I don't like to speak of it. My tennis shoes that I was wearing that day still sit in the corner of my living room, have not moved. I refuse to move them. My wife knows not to touch them. My kids know not to touch them. They stay there. It's a constant reminder. That afternoon, I arrived. This call was right down the street from the firehouse. I had just returned from another call, and I was heading back to my house when this call was dispatched. I was on scene before the call was finished being toned out. I was in the water, screaming on my radio, and that was the last communication I had with anybody till more help got there. As help arrived, there was 5 grown men, some of them my friends, that lifelong friends that I know. We had hold of somebody. If you can touch somebody, I've always been able to help them in some manner. Live or die, I've always been able to help them. I was completely helpless. I had a hold of him and was unable to break the suction. Knowing if I was able to break him, I was going to put one of my guys and or myself in his place because the current in the vacuum was that strong. We were willing to risk our lives, literally, to try to save him, but we were unable to because the volume of water and the suction had him too much. If there would have been a grate in place, we would have had a chance to get him out. I was there that quick. then to have to know after a certain period of time, there's nothing else we can do. We just have to wait. I had fire trucks sucking out water at over 1,500 gallons per minute, shooting it away from the scene, and we were unable to keep up because, unfortunately, Mason had the outlet plugged. Once the water finally subsided, I had to tell my men, my guys, to stop because I can't risk your lives anymore. That is the hardest thing I've ever done in 30 years of the fire service, is to pull my people back. I've never had to do it before, and I don't want to ever have to do it again. I ask you all to please pass this bill so we can hopefully prevent another tragic incident. At what cost is a human life? To me, there's no number you can put on that. Thank you for the time.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's the sponsor panel, Senator.
Yes.
We'll take questions now of anybody on the sponsor panel. We'll start with Vice Chair Kagan.
So, Mr. Godwin, thank you for your public service, your commitment, and for sharing the story. Lieutenant Governor Miller, thank you for all that you do and for being a consoler in chief for this community. Ms. Kearns, there just are no words. I'm so sorry for you and your family, for Mason's just untimely and avoidable passing. Thank you. I hate to take this from the heart, but we are here with the head, and so I have a policy question, Senator Lewis Young. I wonder, this is drafted for municipalities, and I wonder whether there was a choice not to include our counties, and if you could just explain that, or is that already covered in law? If you could speak to that, that'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We decided to start with municipalities. We just felt that would be easier to identify, and we could put a process in place that would be more uniform. But it's correct if you read the fiscal note. The fiscal note identifies about 30,000 in the state, and it claims that about 15,000 are in municipalities. So by dealing with municipalities, we're halfway there.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, Senator Washington.
The same, and my heart goes out to you, and just seeing Mason, he does look like a wonderful, wonderful boy. He will make a difference in the state today. So I'm going to jump to and maybe if the panel can't answer it, then maybe the mayor of Mount Airy can answer. But there are currently, you're required to have a stormwater plans, and it's kind of getting a little bit in line with what the vice chair was raising about, where this fits in our policy around stormwater management and how we can be comprehensive in this approach. So you have a stormwater plan. You're required, the state requires a stormwater plan.
Yes.
And then in that plan, is there any requirements around the infrastructure? Like what, in addition to, once a permit is given or, once it's laid out, is there anything in the plan that addresses the type of?
The trash rack grates? Yeah, I mean, for one thing, this was a very old drain. This drain was put in there about 1968. So I think that's where the real problem in municipalities is that, these are things that are already there. Moving forward, as far as a stormwater management plan that includes trash rack grates, I'm not aware of it. So it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm sure our town engineer could answer that quickly, but.
And then, to that, there is, and if there isn't anyone from MDE here, we do have in code that there is a stormwater plans, and it looks like a lot of them been written and submitted early 2000s, 2004. Yeah. And given the nature of that these get old, and also now with climate change and so much more water, would you oppose, it saying, like, as a part of this plan, we now know that we need to consider, one, these types of structures, and that there should be a review of them every so amount of time, so that we can know, identification of what's vulnerable, and then a plan for addressing that vulnerability.
Yeah, I do think that moving forward, if the code does not have something in it that includes trash rack grates over certain pipes, then it should. As far as the municipalities and what exists right now, I would say there are drains that were in our town that over the years had come into disrepair. So we're going back and correcting problems such as unbolted drains, that sort of stuff. So, I mean, I think it's a great idea. Regardless of what happens today, every mayor should go out there and have their staff, be it Public Works or engineering, look at the most vulnerable areas in their town and address this now.
And then as we figure out the support, et cetera, that it is, and then you as a mayor, because you get to implement what we do, if there are those that, immediately, we know we must do now, but then as a part of the plan, you plan out how you're going to address it going forward. Yeah. And we work with you, that would be something that perhaps we could do.
And it'd be better to get it addressed up front moving forward. Because every drain that we're modifying is a custom job. You can't go online and just buy a trash rack grate. Every one of them has to be custom made. So.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions for the sponsor panel? Okay, thank you, everybody, for your testimony. Ms. Kearns, I think everybody has expressed, aren't really words, I think, at this, but thank you so much for coming in here. And we do have some one additional panel of witnesses. We've got Clayton Kearns. Is Clayton here? Okay. We've got Deborah Eggleston and Allison Eggleston. And then finally, Tyler Bryce from Maryland Municipal League has signed a favor with some amendments. Is Tyler here today from MML? Okay, there you are. Okay. That's the extent of the witnesses on the bill. And Clayton, why don't we start with you, okay? And again, we're not going to put you all on the clock on this one, okay? Just, Clayton, you can start off.
My name is Clay Kearns, and I am Mason's older brother. Mason, he was the kind of kid who made friends anywhere he went. He was kind, caring, and he always tried to be as funny as possible.
Clay, could you just put the mic a little, because we're recording and we want everybody to hear your testimony as well, tuning in, so put that, thank you.
He was kind, caring, and the funniest person I knew. Even on the worst days, Mason would put others first because nothing made him happier than hearing other people's laughs of the people he loved. Mason was always outside, riding his skateboard, taking walks or listening to music, and just taking in the fresh air. He was adventurous. That's why on that rainy Thursday, all he wanted to do was stand in the rain. I was outside with him when it happened. I remember being in the water when he said, "Clay, my foot's stuck." I thought he was joking because the current was just strong. I turned around and I saw him smiling, so I thought he was fine. So I turned back around and it was silent for a few seconds besides the rain beating down. I turned around and I saw him smiling. I thought he was fine. so I turned back around. It went silent for a few seconds. I read that. When I turned back around, he wasn't there. I can't. I'm losing track of him. I'm sorry. I thought he was trying to trick me by running behind the apartment complex when I wasn't looking, or trying to hide under the water to scare me, because that's the type of person he is. I thought he was joking. I called for him and tried to make my way to where he was. I felt his leg and his arm, and I did everything I could to pull. I was screaming for anyone to help, and the first few weeks, the flashbacks were really bad. They were really intrusive. The only way they would stop is if I was hitting myself or banging my head just to get it out of my mind. It only hurt more to picture my little brother in that situation. I couldn't do anything to help. Most people live their life thinking that it can't happen to them and that they're above the odds. And I know that because I thought so too. No one is above the odds, and it can happen to anyone at any time. No one deserves to lose their life, and no one deserves the trauma. There's no point in delaying the change any longer. This could happen to anyone. Dozens of people have lost their lives in just a few short years. It can start here. I refuse to let the inaction take away someone else's brother and best friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Clay. It's very courageous for you to come in today. Okay, Deborah, Allison, whoever would like to go next.
Okay. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your time today. It's so important that this bill get passed. It's always tragic when a family loses a 13-year-old child. However, the way Mason was taken was not only tragic, it was unfathomable. He was a happy, healthy, and vibrant young boy, 5 foot 6 inches tall, weighing 186 pounds, who was literally sucked into a drain pipe. I had 16 inches, but I heard today it was 18. His family had just moved to the Mount Airy apartments 3 months prior and didn't even realize this drain pipe existed. It was camouflaged, covered over with gravel and discarded grass clippings. His brother, Clay, was with him when Mason yelled out, "My foot is stuck." By the time Clay turned around, Mason was gone. He ran to where he had been and found his hand desperately trying to pull him out. He continued pulling and yelling for help as Mason's hand just let go, and that's when he knew he was gone. Meanwhile, water is swelling up around him, and his mom, along with neighbors, responded to Clay's cries for help, had to dive to reach him in their efforts to dislodge him. The trauma this event caused Clay and Erica is undescribable. Clay had to be hospitalized in a psychiatric unit for over a week. We couldn't even proceed with funeral arrangements until it was time that Clay would be able to say goodbye to his brother. Clay still suffers today. Erica still suffers today. Clay's in therapy, on medication, still has nightmares. He just desperately misses his brother so much. His mother, of course, is also suffering today this trauma and trying to support Clay as best as she can. She tried so hard as well to get Mason out, but it was impossible. His death was deemed positional asphyxia by the medical examiner's office. He was so stuck, it took emergency personnel over 45 minutes to extract him after the water had been drained. Of course, this event caused trauma to the first responders, many of whom will be submitting testimonials to this bill, and some testifying in person. The community outreach was overwhelming. We were so grateful for their support and such as therapy dogs and monetary donations, cards. They were so devastated as well that this tragic event occurred and wondered, like us, how could it have even happened? Mason was a healthy, strong young man. Had there been grates, as there are now, he could have simply stood up and or been pulled out. But there were no grates, no signs. How has not this happened before? It's estimated that this drain pipe is about 60 years old. It's important to know Clay and Mason weren't doing anything wrong. They were teenage boys simply playing in their front yard, literally outside their front door with a beach ball. They had no idea of the drainage pond located uphill and adjacent to the apartments would overflow, come down, and take Mason's life. Please support Mason's Law. Just because it seems events like these rarely happen, that doesn't mean it won't happen again tomorrow in our town and in the state of, or another town in the state of Maryland. His death was 100% preventable. It's unimaginable that there are no laws in the books today, either federal or state of Maryland, that could have prevented this tragedy.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go to the end here, and then we'll end up with Maryland Municipal League testimony.
Good morning. My name is Allison Eggleston. I'm known as Aunt Allie by my 4 nephews. Mason would be 14 in 5 days. Instead of celebrating with a skateboarding-themed gift and a family party, I'm here fighting to give him the gift of a legacy. On July 31st, 2025, my mother called me and I answered to hear a tone in which I've never heard before. It was emotionless, not due to a lack of caring, but in a tone that lacked comprehension. What happened to Mason is not comprehensible, and nor will it ever be. Mason is stuck in a storm drain. He's dead. He's drowned. They can't get him out. I need you to go home, she said. I was at work. I'm a firefighter paramedic in Southeast DC. I understood what it meant when the kind Mount Airy Police Department officer said that the retrieval of Mason's body is no longer a rescue, but a recovery. A white sheet placed over his young, barely teenage body. It felt different to be on the other side of the placing of a white sheet on a dead body. This was a body I loved, that I watched grow into a young man, a body so full of laughter, love, and optimism. I continue to watch my sister and nephew attempt to survive minute by minute since the moment he was sucked into that storm drain. I cleaned out his room the next day. His blankets that smelled like him, his skateboard, his guitar, his video games. He was just a boy. Our lives are now divided into the nightmarish separation of before Mason died and after Mason died. In my grief, I turned to research to cope. Since 2015, at least 35 people have been trapped in storm drains similar to the one that took Mason from us. Over half of those deaths were children. These deaths are preventable. Not a single state, district, or territory requires by law the safeguarding of these storm drains, even after the tragedies that came before Mason's. Placing a grate or a similar guard over these storm drain inlets is a simple solution that is guaranteed to save a family the suffering that ours has endured. I have hope. There is a light, and that light is Mason's Law. It's a light that will not bring Mason back, but Mason shines his own light on us each day. Mason's death will not be in vain. Mason's tragedy will save others so long the law in his legacy is passed. It must be passed. Another death would be negligent and inexcusable. That cannot be on our beautiful state's conscience. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our final witness is from Maryland Municipal League, Tyler Bryce. You've signed up favorable with amendments. So tell us a bit about the amendments you're proffering today.
Yeah, so the mayor from Mount Airy already went through our amendments, so we share the same, so I don't want to keep you all too long. The first amendment is just requesting consideration to address the lack of identified funding sources within the bill. As introduced, Senate Bill 189 does not designate or authorize any funding mechanisms to assist our municipalities with the costs associated with retrofitting existing drainage infrastructure or installing new grates. These costs can be significant, particularly for our smaller municipalities, for those with limited fiscal capacity, as we know. Our second amendment, we believe that it is critical to the scope of the bill to be clarified and expanded to explicitly include open drainage inlets located on private property as well. The tragic incident that inspired this legislation occurred on private property, highlighting the importance of comprehensive protections. As currently written, the bill applies to any new or existing open drainage inlet within the municipality. Language that could reasonably be interpreted as limited to publicly owned or maintained property is what we are requesting from you all.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the testimony. Questions for this panel? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 189. I want to thank everybody for their compelling testimony today, and to the Kearns family in particular. So thank you. So that concludes the bill hearing on Mason's Law, Senate Bill 189. We're next going to move to Senate Bill 108. Bill from the Maryland Department of Environment. And I'm going to call Secretary McElwain up here. I saw her come in along with Rick Kessler and Jeremy Baker. Those are the three witnesses signed up on this bill. Along with Ruth Ann Norton, we have virtual. She's in the queue. Okay, we'll take our three witnesses in person, and then we'll go to our one virtual witness who's also signed up favorable. So, Madam Secretary.
Thank you.
Take the time you need to present Senate Bill. I apologize. I think I got the wrong. Yeah, Senate Bill 108. I actually had the wrong witness list. Okay, Lee Curry. I apologize. I was on the next bill. Okay, Lee Curry and Alex Butler. And, okay, well, you tell me who you got with you. You got two straight bills, and I got the two bills intermixed here. Okay, Secretary?
Good afternoon, Chair and Vice Chair, members of the committee. It's good to see all of you, and very happy to have this opportunity to testify today. For the record, I am Serena McElwain, Secretary of Maryland's Department of the Environment, and I'm here to present Senate Bill 108. As I look through this committee, I know most of you, I've worked with a lot of you, and I just really appreciate the partnership that we have, and my sincere thanks really to all of you for all the things that we've done together. This bill gives my agency a practical and much-needed enforcement tool, one that fills a gap between issuing a warning and pursuing costly, time-consuming litigation in circuit court. So I want to explain what I mean by that. Right now, when it comes to violations involving water use, dam safety, floodplains, tidal wetlands, our enforcement options are limited to civil or criminal penalties. Those tools, they do matter, but they are blunt instruments. They can take years to resolve, drain public resources, and often aren't even the right fit for the lower level violations that, yes, they still pose a real risk to public safety and the environment, but again, they're lower level and don't need to be in court. So as a result, too many issues go unaddressed until they become bigger, more dangerous, more expensive. And what I mean by that is we don't even pursue those smaller cases until that issue becomes really big enough that we can take them to civil or criminal court. So SB 108, it creates a reasonable middle ground. It allows MDE to use administrative enforcement to address violations quickly, efficiently, and proportioned to the actual harm that it's causing. And I do want to give you a real-world example. If a dam owner fails to update their emergency action plan, our current option is to take that owner to court. and potentially spend years in litigation using a lot of time and taxpayers' resources. In reality, that risk, it could be addressed far more efficiently through an administrative order that requires corrective action and within a defined time period and before an emergency actually occurs. But today, we don't have that option. Instead, it's like using a chainsaw when a scythe is what's actually needed. That's what we're doing today. I think Marylanders and businesses deserve an enforcement system that is firm and that is fair, but also is appropriate. And this is why this bill is so critical. It allows us to act in good faith to reduce risks before they escalate. It allows us to be balanced and reasonable when we're thinking about these things. And it requires us to consider key factors when we're assessing penalties, such as, was the violation, was it willful? Did it cause immediate environmental harm? What is the cost of restoration? And the economic reasonableness of compliance. And candidly, what we're doing right now is just not efficient. We're spending 2 to 3 years litigating cases that actually could have been resolved administratively in 6 months, freeing up so much of my staff's time and public dollars so that we can focus on those more serious violations. And this is also, this bill, it's also a fiscal benefit. When less significant violations are resolved administratively, any penalties that we're collecting, it is deposited into the Maryland Clean Water Fund, and then we use that money and reinvest it directly into protecting our waters. At the end of the day, Senate Bill 108, it helps us do what Marylanders expect us to do, which is protect water resources, encourage compliance, and resolve problems before they become a crisis. And for that reason, I respectfully request a favorable report on SB 108. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, who do you have with you on your right and your left, so we know who's on the panel? And are you here just for questions, or are you going to testify? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Lee Curry, the Director of the Water and Science Administration at MDE.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Alex Butler, Maryland Parliament Environment, Government Relations. Here for questions.
Any questions for the panel, Secretary, or two accompanying MDE folks? We've got Vice Chair Kagan, then Senator Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Secretary, how are you? It's always good to have you here, along with your excellent team. I just had a quick question. I see that there's no opposition to the bill. It has a daily, each day is a separate violation with a max of 100,000. Can someone who is, let's say, not willfully violating, can someone with all good intent fix it in a reasonable manner so that it's done in a rapid way and they're not accruing additional fees? Question one. And then question two is there other precedent for daily fees at this level for other violations? And maybe you can get back to me if you don't know off the top of your head or your staff doesn't, but other examples so we have some sense of the seriousness of this enforcement mechanism.
Okay, I'll let you answer too. But number one, today we could not do what you asked in number one. We couldn't just, for example, when I gave the example about the dam owner who didn't submit an action plan, we may not even find them. We can have a conversation. What's going on? We don't have your action plan. If we don't get it by XYZ, instead, without this bill, we just simply take them to court. And it makes no sense. Second question, maybe you have the answer to that.
Yes. For the second question, the discharge permits within the department, those are the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permits. They have administrative compliance procedures also. So there is a daily limit for those. It's $10,000 a day. There's a process that the department uses to look at how many days was this? Was it willful? What was the impact? We would be doing the same process, and we have found through that having that administrative path, it's just much more efficient, because right now we can send a letter and then we can send another letter without sometimes getting a response.
Thank you. That's helpful context. Thanks to you both. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Senator Washington.
Yes, and thank you. It's good to see you
Good
also.
to see you as always.
Madam Secretary. And I want to understand and help also maybe our constituents understand the title, this title of the Environment Code that has to do with water resources. And I don't understand it says appropriation or use of waters, reservoir, and dams. So just kind of a quick explanation of, because I saw somewhere, I see that there's a certain amount that's supposed to be used, and yeah, just can you tell us some of the overall issues, and then it can help us, I hope, sort of fit where this comes, because there's supposed to be like a review of these every few years, and so I just wanted to check.
Sure, there's a variety of different areas that are covered there. You had mentioned the water appropriation and use permits. The department for decades has managed the water resources throughout the state, and every entity that's withdrawing water from the ground or withdrawing water from the river gets a water appropriation and use permit. And the reason for that is we want to make sure there's enough water for everyone. Right. And these permits are really about making sure that during drought conditions there's enough water.
And I think I want to back up just for a minute. So water, it's a water. This isn't water that's coming from the water the water sewage company. This is water that is a public asset, is considered an asset. Could you explain how that is established, and basically our right or ability as the state of Maryland to manage a water asset? Yes. In contrast to what might happen in my sink or what might happen somewhere else.
Yes, so that water is a public resource, groundwater, surface water, waters of the state. We have a responsibility to manage those so that when it's being used, when it's being appropriated, it's done in a way that's sustainable. It's done in a way that there's going to be resources available to everyone else, and to make sure that during drought conditions, very dry periods, that those resources are available.
And are we also under federal mandates around our water assets?
There are
Clean
not,
Water Act or anything?
There are Safe Drinking Water Act requirements for water. That's for community water systems or public water systems. It's a little different. That doesn't look at how much water is being taken out of the ground or river. It's the question of how clean is it before it gets delivered to a home or a business. And then, so these are sort of private dams, and how does that happen? How does a private dam or pond get created out of a public asset? Well, not a rhetorical question, just really just understanding how something comes to be created by perhaps a private entity, and then the responsibility to maintain that. And that hasn't happened in some time. There are a little over 600 dams in Maryland owned by a variety of entities, whether it's private, whether it's public, state, federal, also local jurisdictions. If one was to be created, there's a large permitting process that would happen to look at the impacts of all the resources. But one of the examples that the Secretary provided is a very good one. There's a law in place that requires an emergency action plan. Each dam owner for a significant hazard, high hazard is a dam that if it failed, it's likely that someone would die as a result of that. The emergency action plan is also in law, but if someone doesn't update their emergency action plan, get their right phone numbers in there to make sure they call the right people, that can impact an emergency. And our only tool right now would be, as the Secretary was mentioning, pursuing a civil action instead of this administrative process that we're requesting.
Any additional questions for the Secretary or her team? Oh, we've got Senator Hester. I apologize.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Good to see you, Madam Secretary. I was trying to remember our debate from last year, Mr. Curry, and I remember looking for hours at that spreadsheet of like 600 plus dams.
Right.
So does this bill apply to all 600 dams? First of all, can you remind the committee what we did last year? And then my second question is, does this apply to all of those 600 types of dams, which could be a farmer's pond or homeowners association? I mean, there's some instances where there's only one person owning one of these.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah, so last year you passed the private dam repair fund. And the question was, with the 600 dams throughout Maryland, how many of those are privately owned, and what are the challenges associated with those? And there was a very large cost and a lot of maintenance that needs to be done on, and you gave a great example of the homeowners association. Last year's bill resulted in a dam registration fee for those owners of the only, and that's the dams on the Maryland inventory of dams. So that's the 600. It required an annual registration fee, and then also there's a fee that now is part of our, if we're to issue a permit to construct a dam or to repair a dam, there's a fee associated with that. And both of those fees, the intent was directing both of those fees to a private dam repair fund that could be used to help support the example you provided with funding to do the maintenance on those structures.
The second part of my question was, any one of those 600 dams, if they're out of compliance, on the first day they get a $5,000 fine. Is that what this bill says?
It gives the department a tool to use with a maximum per day fine of $5,000, but to consider all these other factors when issuing that. And we have a very similar process with our discharge permits that's $10,000 a day, but we typically don't, there's ways that we scale it. Our intent is not to issue someone a $5,000 penalty because they didn't turn in their emergency action plan. We just want to be able to send a letter that's a little bit stronger with a stronger incentive to update your plan, because you have the wrong phone numbers in there. Then if there wasn't an accident and the dam failed, that would delay responding appropriately.
I just want to say, thank you for that question. I just want to say with the fees, it does require the discretion of the agency when we're thinking about what fee we should apply to the particular case. But again, right now, it's hard for us to have a conversation because again, we can now only take you to court. That's it. We can't send you a letter. We can't give a simple fine of $5,000 is not a simple fine or a small one, but we can't even have a conversation. It's blunt. We just take you straight to civil court or, of course, criminal if it's something really, really egregious. So this bill, it truly is allowing the flexibility for us to be reasonable and have those conversations and try to get them to act, because they are supposed to do certain things, and we can't keep ignoring them.
No, I mean, just to be clear, I support people submitting their dam safety plans. It's just, it seems like that these people they just registered their dams last year. You know, there's a couple fees that they're paying. I just think we want to be cognizant and measured that the penalty fits whatever they're delinquent on. And I don't currently see that kind of sliding scale in the bill.
Okay, Senator Washington, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there's another section, and I think some in my bills I asked to have the preceding articles to make sense of what's happening. So under 5-509, and is this what you're talking about? There's a notice to repair or remove the water infrastructure asset. So you can, under this existing law, and it hasn't been updated since 2022, but it's been around for a while, that you're able to give notice to homeowners, to council units, entities, all of this. And it's based on a complaint or the department's own initiative. And so there are all these things. And it seems to suggest and see that the department would do the work. Like if something seems so dangerous that the individual who owns it doesn't repair it, the department repairs it. One, do you still do that? Or do you do that? And two, is this what this notice is this what you're talking about? Trying to have some actual, a option other than just going to court? Is that part of this section? Because it's a water infrastructure asset.
Yes, that's one example. You're referring to the dam portion.
Right.
And yes, it could be used for that instead of going to court if we wanted to pursue some type of an incentive to get someone to respond. I mean, that's a monetary incentives will work in some cases. Our goal is not the monetary piece. Our goal is to either get the dam fixed, get the emergency action plan up to date, or to get the reports that need to be provided to us to best manage the resources and infrastructure. That's really the
Yeah, I mean, the
behind all
law
this.
says that you're taking this action to protect life, property, or the
Right.
environment. So I'm clear about that. I'm just trying to understand is what you're saying, that your ability to do all of this, it's only that you're sending a letter. I was trying to see what the letter was and what the process is more fully to date. Or if this doesn't apply to what you're asking for, then let me know.
The process to date is the one option we have. Sorry, thank you. The one option we have is to send a letter and say, please do this. And the other option would be, we'll have to take you to civil court and pursue a civil action. We're looking for something in between that can provide more incentive, and that would be this administrative compliance process.
And that's where the injunctions, is that the injunction section, the article, there's a 5-514 that precedes, 13, that precedes this section, and it talks about injunctions. And it talks about circuit court.
So Senator, the process right now, as a result of administrative process, this goes through OAH, Office of Administrative Hearings.
Okay.
If any time anyone feels aggrieved by that process, they are able to appeal that to circuit court. So this is truly, as the Secretary and Director were saying, this is a middle ground option. It gives more weight to our letters. And also I would just comment on Senator Hester's question. We're not interested in charging anyone, I don't think I speak for the department here, $5,000 right up front. That is a capped maximum. That is half of what civil penalties are right now in law. So really the intent is to give more weight to those letters so that people come to us and have conversations well before we get to addressing any penalties.
Just, Mr. Chair, if I, just so that I'm understanding the whole, there's sections in here about injunction, and I just want to understand how they relate to each other. But that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 108. Now we're going to go to that other MDE bill that I got a little bit mixed on, and we've got Senate Bill 208, Secretary, and also I've got Rick Kessler, Jeremy Baker in person, and then we do have one virtual witness that we'll bring in next. So, Madam Secretary, we're on Senate Bill 203, and the floor is yours.
It's good to see you all again. All right, well, I'll go ahead and say, for the record again, I am Serena McElwain, Secretary of Maryland's Department of the Environment, and I am here today to talk about SB 203. At its core, this bill addresses a critical gap in how we regulate lead paint abatement in Maryland. When we talk about lead abatement, we're not talking about paperwork, we're not talking about permits, we're talking about children's brains, family health, and whether a home is truly safe. And when the stakes are that high, there is no room for error. And that's where SB 203 comes in. This bill gives MDE the authority to require reasonable, and I'll say it again, reasonable performance bonds or liability insurance for accredited lead abatement professionals. And here's why it matters. We have seen too many examples of lead work gone wrong. Unqualified or careless contractors are performing lead abatement, and they're certifying that the work is complete, and then they disappear. When that happens, and when a problem surfaces, it's the families, it's the property owners, and ultimately it's the state who end up paying to fix the damage. The people simply walk away. Everyone else absorbs the cost. This is not accountability when you're talking about children's health, and their health is on the line. So SB 203, what it does is shifts the responsibility back to where it belongs, and that is on the professionals who are actually performing the work. Without this bill, there is no meaningful protection when the lead abatement fails. Requiring insurance and bonding is a common sense safeguard. It ensures that contractors demonstrate competence, responsibility, and professionalism before they are allowed to do the work. So if this bill is passed, it raises industry standards, it weeds out unqualified actors, it reduces disputes and costly litigation, and it gives families the confidence that lead hazards are actually being eliminated and not just being signed off. That's what's happening sometimes today. And it also protects property owners who should not have to pay twice or worse, which we've seen, live with unresolved lead hazards because of someone else's negligence. At the end of the day, this bill, it's a public health and an equity bill because we know that lead exposure disproportionately impacts low-income communities and communities of color. Those families deserve the same protections and assurances that we expect in every other area of environmental and health regulation. And for those reasons, I respectfully ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 203. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, welcome, Mr. Kessler. Mr. Baker, questions for the secretary or her two sidekicks? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. We do have one virtual witness, Ruth Ann Norton, who's also signed up favorable. We're going to bring Ruth Ann on here, and we'll take her testimony next. Pull her up.
I probably should pay to get that second screen.
Okay, Ruth Ann, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, Ms. Norton, you are signed up favorable, and we have a lot of other bills, so we got to put you on the clock here. Okay, so why don't you proceed favorable and start when you're ready.
Chair, if I could clarify, I am signed up on Senate Bill 203, but I am
apologize. This is Senate Bill 203.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And I want to thank I'm Ruth Ann Norton, President and CEO of the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. I also have the pleasure of serving as chair of the Maryland Lead Poisoning Prevention Commission, which is supported by the Maryland Department of the Environment. I come in favor of Senate Bill 203. I think people read the headlines about the abuses that were put upon 1,400 households in Maryland, an inspector who issued falsified certificates when families in good faith were getting inspections and owners in good faith were getting inspections to protect the lives of our children and our pregnant women from the toxic legacy and impact of childhood lead poisoning. The Maryland legislature last year did a very good bill to ensure that we could hold fraudulent activities, such as we saw from Ronald Barkley in this instance, to civil penalties. But one failing in that is that the civil penalties did not also require that the contractor or the inspector conducting activities that could harm children if not done properly didn't have a bond to ensure that families, owners, and residents could collect. What this bill does is ensure that there will be a bond of at least $50,000 equivalent to the cap on the civil penalty. It's a common sense bill that is critically important. If we think about what happens to one child poisoned by lead, they will lose over $2 million compared to their peers in long-term learning. They're more likely not to graduate from high school, to fail grade level reading, and to have impairment in their lives that also could include a higher likelihood of brain damage and sorry, I heard the beep. So I really urge the committee to adopt this bill and thank the Maryland Department of the Environment and the legislature for your leadership in making Maryland the leading state on taking on this issue and achieving to date a 99.6% reduction in cases.
Okay, we're going to start with Vice Chair Kagan has a question for Ms. Norton.
I know that we're never supposed to do this, and we're supposed to only ask questions, but Ruth Ann Norton, you have been a shero on lead paint and lead poisoning for so many years, and I just want to give you a shout out and thank you for your leadership. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Senator Washington, question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And ditto what my colleague said. I'm honored to actually serve on the commission with Ruth Ann Norton, Senator Washington here. And this legislation and the need for this has come up. And also, it's rare there's an opportunity to pass something where both the landlords and the tenants are able to, that we're protecting both at the same time. And so I think that this was a creative way to do it. Could you perhaps give you started to talk about the consequences, but I don't know, pick a jurisdiction, Anne Arundel, Carroll, wherever, any sense of the amount of lead, exposure to lead that we're finding in some areas, whether it's urban or rural, and the fact that the sort of long time policy action that Maryland has taken against lead poisoning?
Yeah, and thank you, Senator Washington, both for your service on the Lead Commission and for your service to Baltimore and to the state. Look, I think I've been doing this work in partnership with the Maryland Department of the Environment for 33 years, so older than the secretary probably is. But the reality is that what we know is housing, whether it's rental housing or homeowners built before 1978, pose a great risk. Lead paint is still the preponderance of the cause of childhood lead poisoning in the state of Maryland, and overwhelmingly so. And whether it's Anne Arundel County or Garrett County, the one concern that I continue to have is while we have made such progress in having universal blood lead testing, having aggressive and common sense enforcement, and having really good participation by responsible property owners to address this, the risk remains high in any community that has older housing. It is not specific to Baltimore. There is more concentration there because of long-term disinvestment in communities, long-term lack of, many decades ago, lack of enforcement of lead violation notices. We have made miraculous progress there because of the Department of the Environment and others in leadership, and the legislature to do that. But the risk remains in rural housing, where we need to continue to make efforts in older communities in Howard and Arundel in Montgomery County. Our family advocate attorney who takes these cases to housing court recently was in Montgomery County on a successful case to ensure that we're using the housing court lever to enforce standards to clean up lead hazards. So throughout the state, we are looking at this. The biggest concern is that we make sure every parent gets their child tested. People don't think because of their income level or their geographic location that they are immune to lead poisoning. And something to understand is not only that loss of economic return for that child. We know in recent studies in our work in New Jersey, the depth of risk to pregnant women and the fetus before being born is extraordinarily high. Hopkins and Rutgers have produced new studies on that. The state of New Jersey is now aggressively testing pregnant women, but it's an arc of lifetime impact. The Journal of American Medicine recently released a report showing lead poisoning as the primary cause of 5.5 million cardiac deaths. So whether it is a child exposed or a lifetime of exposure, we need to make sure that we are aggressively bringing an end to this toxic legacy. Maryland is better off for its leadership on this, our ability for long-term earnings, and equity surely are, and our public safety are surely the beneficiaries of this.
So much for that. Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions for Ms. Norton? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill here on Senate Bill 203. Thank you, Madam Secretary and MDE team. The next move, I think Senator Henson beat Senator Bailey in by 30 seconds. So we're going to go in the order. Folks came in, Senator Henson. We're going to go with Senate Bill 130, then we'll go to Senator Bailey right after that on Senate Bill 166. So Senate Bill 130, I've got, can I call up you? We have one favorable with amendment. Can I just bring them up here? Okay, I've got Savar Shaw from Maryland Legal Aid signed up straight favorable, and Brian Enlue from AOBA signed up favorable with amendment. So I don't know if Brian is Brian here on behalf of? Okay, fair enough. Okay, Senator Henson, why don't you take the time you need to present Senate Bill 130, and there is one witness signed up unfavorable. Okay, Brian, why don't you come up to the witness table? We'll take the unfavorable after this panel, okay? Senator, you can proceed.
Thank you, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, members of the committee. I'm Senator Shanika Henson here to present Senate Bill 130. This bill is the Environment Water Individual Unit Meters Bill. This bill came as a result of a study that was done in Montgomery County, and that's why you'll see testimony from the Montgomery County executive, and you'll also see testimony from other folks that do work in that area, but also you'll see a lot of testimony from people who do work in the space of landlord-tenant rights. You'll see testimony in support of the bill from Maryland Legal Aid. You'll see Renters United Maryland. You'll see the Consumer Protection Division has opined on this bill as well, because this is an area that we simply have not caught up to in the law. We have realized the need for individual sub-metering when it comes to the gas and electric utility, but when it comes to water utility, we have not caught up to the law of having individual sub-metering. The result of that has been, in this particular complex that was investigated in Montgomery County, that there were malfunctioning water meters and there were excessive charges that related to it, and people couldn't parse out those charges. There were tenants who were retroactively overbilled. There were tenants that were receiving excessive service fees, and in some cases, those service fees matched or exceeded their monthly water bills. And there was no remedy or solution for those tenants, and proposed by the Montgomery County Office of Consumer Protection was the need for legislation to address just that. So this bill, which I am cross-filing with Delegate Lorik Charkoudian, will be designed to address this in a statewide capacity. Now, I've said Montgomery County several times, and you know I am a senator from Anne Arundel County, but I've decided to file this bill because the issue is not just limited to the report, to the complex that was investigated, but the issue of the need for individual sub-metering for water is something that's needed statewide, certainly here in Anne Arundel County as well. So with that, I would ask the committee for a favorable report, and I would defer to the panel. Thank you.
We only have a few witnesses here, so we're not going to go on the clock. Okay, sir. Mr. Shaw, why don't you go next? Then we'll go to.
Thank you, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, members of the committee. My name is Zafar Shaw. I'm the Advocacy Director for the Human Right to Housing at Maryland Legal Aid. We serve low-income renters across the state. We did over 4,700 representations in eviction defense under the Access to Counsel and Eviction law last year alone. And we see that our low-income clients are facing eviction sometimes for unpaid utility bills, including water bills. And so the issue that Senator Henson has brought forward here today really comes into focus in the very small margins that our clients live on in their budgets. Across the state, renters are cost burdened. Over 53% of tenants are cost burdened and can't afford their homes. So if you look at the wages of an average renter, they're earning around $22, $11 less than what they need to earn to afford a one-bedroom fair market rent apartment. So as you can imagine, when there is inconsistency in water billing from a sub-meter and we lack regulations to hold accountable the third party, not the landlord, that does the measurements, does the equipment installation, may not do equipment checks, may not provide information about the meaning of monthly bills, that leaves low-income tenants vulnerable, and often the outcome can be an eviction case. I've provided an example of what one of those bills looks like for a company that does an apartment building submetering in Howard County. And as you can tell in that example, in my written testimony, there are terms and numbers which have no explanation for the tenant who receives that bill, nor is there explanation in their written lease. Even in electric and gas submetering in Maryland, there is regulation, and we continue to see that, for instance, an example in Salisbury currently, a whole apartment building is receiving $125 service fees for electric submetering in violation of current regulations. So these are important issues to take up, and we thank Senator Henson for bringing this bill. We urge a favorable report.
Thank you. Mr. Anlou from AOBA.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Brian Anley with the Apartment and Office Building Association of Metro Washington. I'd just like the record to reflect that I don't often get to sit next to Mr. Shah in agreement on something, but here we are, and we largely agree. AOBA members support water billing transparency. We think that submetering is good for the tenant as well. It gives them direct control over their bills. And some of our members have reported that when we move to submetering, it also helps with conservation. When people are responsible for their own bills, it drops the amount of usage by up to 20 to 30% or more in some cases. And so we support all of that. And we just have a few, what we hope the sponsor will consider to be friendly amendments. We've shared them on the House side as well, and they consider them to be friendly amendments as well. And they really deal with what happens if the submeter malfunctions, if there's a leak, the amount of time that the record keeping must be kept. The leak detection requirements on that specifically, that technology is not very accurate, and it's very difficult to scale for multifamily buildings. And so we're asking that the leak detection requirements be taken out. And then just lastly, on the service fees or administrative fees, we felt that $1 was too low, and we asked that that be raised to the what the housing provider is actually billed, but not more than the market cost of those services. But with that, we urge a favorable report with amendments.
Okay, questions for the sponsor, Senator Henson, or the two witnesses? Okay, seeing none, thank you. We do have one unfavorable signed up. Is Bill Castelli here?
Thank you.
I saw Ms. Castelli here signed up unfavorable on behalf of the realtors. Okay, don't see Mr. Castelli here. Going once, twice, three times. That concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 130. We next go to Senator Bailey on Senate Bill 166. And Senator, you are, well, there's actually, I see Mr. Stegman, hold back there. You're signed up for information purposes only, but Senator, why don't you proceed, and then we'll bring Mr. Stegman up here on Senate Bill 166.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished members of the committee, Senator Jack Bailey, here representing District 29, which encompasses all of St. Mary's and the lower half of Calvert County. Senate Bill 166 would create an administrative process to suspend or revoke the licenses of individuals participating in shellfish aquaculture if they commit a very serious violation of the state law. Senate Bill 166 authorizes the Department of Natural Resources to suspend shellfish aquaculture harvest permits or a shellfish aquaculture harvester registration card for 5 years for a first offense and revoke a permit or registration card for a second offense. The offenses that this process would apply to are very similar to the offenses for holders of an oyster authorization, with one difference. An oyster authorization can be suspended for taking oysters during closed season. Since aquaculture doesn't have a closed season, that's not included in this bill. In its place, this bill would allow an aquaculture permit or registration card to be suspended or revoked if the holder takes an oyster for commercial purposes from a natural oyster bar or public shellfish area without a valid authorization. Now, I think this committee, and I appreciate everything that you did for several years, we worked on developing this process dealing with tidal fish licensees. And you remember the watermen came and they talked about it, and this was a fairness issue. They talked about the fact, wait a minute, yes, there's some bad actors, and that's what DNR has instituted this law for. Heck, back when I was with the Natural Resource Police, I helped with that law. But the fact is, while we were spending a couple years to get that law where we needed to get it, there were people that were aquaculture holders. They didn't have a license to go out on the natural oyster bar. They obviously, no one had a license to work on a sanctuary, where the Natural Resource Police would catch them in a very serious infraction, and they would simply get a court date and have a fine. But they would be allowed to keep working in their aquaculture situation, and they would absolutely lose no license because their license, there was no thing in the law to do that. Where if they had been the same person, but a holder of a commercial license, they would have lost their ability to be out there. So that is the reality of it. We had a situation that occurred just last year where an individual took tens of thousands of oysters illegally, received a $1,000 fine, right? And still to this day could oyster all year. Right, so that's why we have brought this bill. So both the holder of a tidal fish license with an oyster authorization and an aquaculture permit holder are licensed by DNR to harvest and sell oysters. However, currently, a tidal fish licensee is subject to administrative penalties that can result in the suspension or revocation of their authorization for violating a state law protecting the public oyster fishery, such as catching oysters sanctuary, while a licensed person to engage in aquaculture activities is not. This bill is intended to treat both license holders equally under the law if they commit a serious violation. And obviously, as we know from dealing with the watermen, and we know from dealing with aquaculture holders and permit holders, the majority of people are good law-abiding citizens. But we need penalties to deal with those who aren't. That's why I have provided you with the opportunity to work on this bill. I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 166, and I thank you for your consideration. I stand for any questions.
Okay, Senator Brooks.
Hi, thanks, Senator. Some might argue that a 5-year suspension on a first-time violation seemed to be a bit harsh, so how would you address that?
That's the same penalty that this committee came up with for someone who had a wild oyster license last year.
Okay.
That is
All
that is the same exact penalty that we have.
Okay. And one follow-up question, would that person be allowed to work on a boat with another licensed person, or they're just suspended from working in the field altogether?
So the same penalty would occur, just like in the wild fishery. They would not be allowed to work in that. But I will tell you that DNR and Delegate Jacobs and I have worked on an amendment that I think DNR is going to provide to the committee that helps massage just a little bit of that information that I'm sure you'd be interested in seeing.
Okay, good. I was thinking about the livelihood that would, Okay, thanks, Chair.
Okay, Senator Carrozza. And I want to give a shout out to Senator Zucker, just joined us because he was bored over there in the Budget and Tax Committee. Okay, Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Senator Bailey, and welcome, Chair Zucker. I wanted to follow up on some of the correspondence that you've had with Dan Worrell, who's my constituent. You know that I represent the Maryland Coastal Bays. Dan Worrell is the chairman of the Aquaculture Coordinating Council. He supports the bill, but appears to have some questions about definitions. I know that you all have been responsive to some of his emails that he has sent to you in advance of today's bill hearing. It looks like he's requesting some follow-up after this hearing and references, I think, including some input from the Aquaculture Coordinating Council. So I wanted to give you just the opportunity. Again, it looks like he's put something out there to work with you on some of the questions and issues that he's raised.
Thank you very much, Senator, and I appreciate that. And I just met with him as I was on there. I also sit on the Aquaculture Coordinating Council. So we had a very lengthy discussion about this, and again with DNR, and that's what I was referencing when I was saying that DNR is well aware of that, and we have an amendment to massage some of the concerns.
So that the amendment you discussed
Yes.
addresses most of Mr. Worrell's issues that he's raised.
So I just asked him if he had seen it. He had not seen it from DNR, but it's from sitting on the council and what I saw, I thought it addressed it, but we want to make sure that he is coordinated and agrees.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for Senator Bailey? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Senator. We do have Matt Stegman here from Chesapeake Bay Foundation for information purposes only, not taking a position. Mr. Stegman, why don't you just proceed?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I just want to say at the top, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, we appreciate and agree with the intent of this bill. We think that penalties for folks who poach oysters from sanctuaries should be fair, and that they should represent a true significant deterrent, not a slap on the wrist, because the sanctuaries are a significant public investment. You know, the bill does appear to put a penalty regime in place that does mirror what this committee did last year for watermen in the public fishery. All I would say to this committee is you do have written testimony from Dr. Allison Colden, and she apologizes for not being able to be here with you. She's our CBF fishery scientist, highlights some of the differences between how the public fishery and aquaculture operate in practice. And I would defer to Mr. Worrell. I believe he's going to be testifying later to speak with more authority, you know, about how those practices actually operate in the water. We did make an effort to connect with Senator Bailey before the hearing, and just through nobody's fault, we were not able to do that, but we're ready to work with the sponsor, DNR, this committee, to, you know, any amendments that are necessary to make sure that the bill is fair and fits how these fisheries actually work in practice. So.
Well, we don't have any additional witnesses signed up, so you are the two witnesses. But in any event, any questions from Mr. Stegman? Yes, Senator Carrozza.
I'm sorry, I was following up, Mr. Chair, on your comments about no other witnesses. Okay, I thought Mr. Worrell did. Okay.
My name's Dan Worrell.
Dan, come on.
I apologize. I thought I signed up properly online. We went over that. I must have made a mistake. I had a long version, a short version. I'm going to go with the short. Thank you. My name's Dan Worrell. I'm the chairman of the Aquaculture Coordinating Council of Maryland. I'm also here as a aquaculture operator. When I first saw this bill, I agree. We need to absolutely stop poaching, and nobody should be able to take oysters from sanctuaries and break the law. This has been a challenging business over the last 5 years. So to see people who are not following the rules, I do believe that we need to absolutely get them out of the space so that us working to follow the rules can continue to operate. With that being said, my favorable with amendments that I thought I had properly signed up for were regarding many things that Senator Bailey and I have discussed, and other groups. We had discussion. We covered a lot of these things, and I just would request that everybody, when looking at aquaculture and wild harvest and submerged land lease, things can get really confusing. They still confuse some of us that know what we're doing today. So I do appreciate Senator Bailey for talking to us and making clear the intent of his law. So apologies, I'm nervous. I've never done this before, but I do support this bill, and I appreciate Senator Bailey and the rest of the Aquaculture Coordinating Council proposing the amendments that we discussed in the room back here.
Any questions for our supplemental witness here? Okay, thank you for your testimony. Okay, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 166. I see Senator Lamb has arrived in the House.
Thank you.
We're going to take Senator Lamb next on Senate Bill 54. And Senator, I've got, I don't know who you want to bring up here. I've got several witnesses signed up. I've got in person Danielle Bauer of Ferris, and okay, we have 2 virtual. What about the virtual? Okay. Okay, who's up there? Because I don't have.
Yeah, so we have Dr. Matt Weeman, who's here. I think Danielle was signed up on behalf of the association for.
Are you from that same association?
You're
okay, fair enough.
Yes.
Okay, Senator Lamb, Senate Bill 54. Take the time you need to present the bill.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Here to testify and introduce Senate Bill 45. For the record, Clarence Lamb, Senator in District 12. And so this bill came about from a conversation that I had with a veterinarian over the summer. And the issue is new, although not probably unfamiliar to this committee, given the posture that the legislature has taken over the years when it comes to cannabis. All of you are obviously aware that there is now, about 10 years ago, the legislature took steps to allow for medical cannabis use in humans. And then a couple years ago, this body supported moving forward with recreational cannabis use as well. Separate from that, this bill applies to veterinarians because over the summer I'd heard from some vets who were concerned because they had heard from animal owners or pet owners that some of their pets or animals were experiencing things like cancer, and their veterinarians were not able to even discuss the options for cannabis use for those animals to be able to alleviate their pain and suffering for those animals, even if the animal owner requested it. And so the issue here is that the State Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners has general kind of guidance out that I think for many veterinarians, they find concerning to be able to even talk about the use of cannabis for these animals. And so the State Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners, I have a letter here dated from a couple years ago. It says that if the board receives a complaint involving an adverse reaction to a CBD product that was administered, prescribed, or recommended by a veterinarian, issues such as the status of the law, the status of FDA approval of CBD products may be considered by the board during a disciplinary proceeding. So that, I think has given a lot of caution to veterinarians to even talk about whether cannabis might be helpful for an animal. And so this bill just seeks to join 4 other states by setting a baseline level of protection to ensure that veterinarians are able to answer their clients' or customers' questions and provide evidence-based information about the use of cannabis and CBD products for pets who may need them. So very straightforward. It does not change the standard of care required for veterinarians and is modeled after a 2011 bill that similarly ensured that physicians in the state would have conversations or could have conversations with their patients about the potential risks and benefits of cannabis for human beings, for individuals. So this is not to, the veterinarians would not be dispensing or providing the cannabis. This is just so that the pet owner, the animal owner can have that conversation with the veterinarians, because even in the current posture, it seems like there's a lot of hesitation to be able to even have those conversations. It's up to the pet owner, the animal owner, to be able to obtain the cannabis, but being able to seek that advice from a veterinarian is incredibly important for these animal owners. So with that, that is the bill. Happy to turn over.
Before we go to our witness, just a couple, what are the other 4 states?
Yes.
I will have to get back to you on exactly what.
And then secondly, obviously, on the cannabis talk broadly, we have issues involving federal law that we've, dealt with. I mean, obviously, national, is there any federal law in this space that would have an impact on the vets, giving, I don't know, I'm just asking, because we've obviously encountered that in first medical cannabis, adult use cannabis, still illegal under federal law. Is that relevant here? Are there federal provisions in place that could
I don't think it's relevant here because I think under the First Amendment, the veterinarian can have those conversations with an individual or with the client or customer.
They just,
I think the
because
concern here is
they're not actually dispensing. And
right, they're not actually
having
dispensing.
a conversation.
I think the concern here is that those conversations, the board of veterinary medical examiners might consider that for disciplinary action.
Okay, well, let's go to the association. Let's, sir, you've got the floor, so why don't you repeat your name, because, obviously a substitute witness here, and tell us who you are, and then you can proceed.
Matthew Weeman. I'm a practicing veterinarian on the Eastern Shore. Matthew Weeman, practicing veterinarian on the Eastern Shore here in representation of the Maryland Veterinary Medical Association and its membership on this Senate Bill 54 to testify in support. Essentially, I think communication is the word of the day. That's how we view what's been proposed, is to reinforce the veterinary client-patient relationship and allow us to have a discussion with our clientele. I'm a practicing food animal veterinarian, small animal veterinarian. I've done a number of ER years in ER medicine. This is a topic that comes up frequently in small animal medicine in particular at all sides. CBD products are available over the counter. Consumers are taking those in. They're giving them to their pets. And they come to us with questions. And most of us feel a little bit hamstrung in that we try to keep up on this, but we can't discuss it with them knowing that the Maryland Board of Veterinary Medicine or the veterinary medical examiners could take punitive action against our license if we do that. And so it oftentimes leads to this weird, coy kind of dynamic between the veterinarian and the client who's like, well, my dog is taking a CBD type product, is that okay? And we just kind of lean back and we're like, I don't know, is your dog okay? And it just leads to a series of back and forth kind of weird questions. And it'd be helpful if we could just mention to them, well, it's important since your dog is on CBD that it can interact with the medications that we're prescribing to treat your dog for arthritis. So it's important that we know that, and we want to help guide you in the direction of making sure that we don't cause harm and to go over the side effects of these products, which we are learning more about. And so this is not so much, at least our appreciation and favorable testimony here is not to say, please allow us to prescribe certain things. That's not what this is about. I do think there's some conflict at the federal level. I try to address that in the written testimony before the committee. Ultimately, we think this removes a layer of ambiguity at the state level and helps us to just reinforce that communication so that we can keep pets safe and clients informed of the questions that they're bringing to us every day.
Has anybody, just so I'm clear, has anybody actually been the subject of any disciplinary action or threatened, or has the topic actually ever come up from the board on this subject? Because, sometimes somebody has to identify a problem, an actual problem that's existed, and if nobody's ever been told that this could subject to, I mean, I get the ambiguity argument. I think that's a pretty good argument, but I just put it out there. Has any vet actually been the subject or any kind of inquiry in this space ever in the state of Maryland?
I wouldn't be privy to that as a practicing veterinarian or a board member for the Maryland Veterinary Medical Association, so we would have to consult the Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners. I will say, and I don't think that they're making this a priority to be punitive to veterinarians, but they want the ability to essentially address it if there is a client-driven complaint centric on it, or if an animal were to be harmed by an over-the-counter product and it's perceived that the veterinarian in some way encouraged its use. And that's part of why we don't want to talk about it, is we don't want anything that we're saying to be construed as encouraging it, even if what we're really saying is, maybe you shouldn't use that product. We can't protect that animal from harm by not being allowed to have the conversation and say, client X, your dog we're treating for arthritis, we've put your dog on an arthritis medication. Please know that CBD is metabolized through the same liver pathways as the medications we're prescribing. That could cause an issue with the prescribing medication. And so we're trying to avoid these side effects that are happening as a result of what consumers are already doing. By allowing us to have the conversation, it allows us to open the door to educate them appropriately and keep them and their animals safe is what we hope this would achieve.
And I think for a lot of veterinarians, I don't think they want to risk going down that path of putting their license in jeopardy, right? So as I mentioned, there's this letter that says if the board receives a complaint involving an adverse reaction regarding a cannabis product, that's recommended by a veterinarian, it could maybe considered by the board during a disciplinary proceeding, right? And so it's not worth a veterinarian putting their license at risk to do this. They will, kind of dance around the issue or not touch or discuss cannabis with that animal owner. But I've heard from multiple veterinarians that this is a real issue. They just kind of step back from it because they don't want to test. Nobody really wants to test their waters on this issue. And it sounds like you've heard from others too, based on your testimony.
I think I get it. Vice Chair Kagan.
Mr. Chair, Senator Lamb, kind of a wow. Like, I've not thought about this, and thank you for the bill. Two things. As the first Democratic co-sponsor of medical marijuana, I would say you are barking up the right tree here with the vice chair. Sorry, too easy. My question, and I assume this is just a total softball here. The bill as drafted has an October 1 effective date. I assume if it were the will of the committee that you would have not object to an earlier effective date so vets can start communicating more frankly with their patients, their clients?
Yeah, it just defaulted to the original drafting date, but yes, happy to make that sooner.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Senator Hester.
I was just curious about the Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners. Do they have a position on the bill?
That is harder for me to answer than one would assume it should be. No, they have no official position on the bill.
Okay, because this is presumably to help the vets out, so it's a little surprising they wouldn't take a position in support, but I just put it out there.
Can I just highlight, we're
Sure.
two distinctly different organizations, and so
Oh, okay.
they
Fair
don't
enough.
have
I apologize.
the Maryland Veterinary Medical Association has a favorable position on this bill.
Okay,
The
it's the
Board of
board.
Veterinary Medical Examiners, that's a state agency, does not.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification.
And we did communicate with the board just to make them aware of this. So I think they're familiar with this legislation. My sense is that perhaps they're concerned about the federal intersection there to kind of condone this. But, I don't think they're, I have to check the bill file, but I don't think they're formally opposed to this bill.
Yeah, they're not, okay. Okay, well, any additional questions for this panel? We do have two virtual witnesses who I want to get into the queue here. Okay, seeing none, thank you, Senator, and sir, Mr. Weeman, thank you. We're going to go to Christopher Cano from SEIU first. Mr. Cano, you're signed up favorable, and you're going to be on the 2-minute clock, okay?
Thank
Why
you,
don't you
Mr.
proceed?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So SEIU Local 500 represents thousands of public sector workers and professionals across Maryland, including licensed and credentialed employees who are subject to professional discipline boards and the evolving regulatory frameworks that we see in a legal state like Maryland, where cannabis adult use has been legalized, where medical marijuana has been legalized, and we strongly support these common sense protections for licensed professionals in this bill. More broadly, what this bill truly reflects is an important principle for workers and professionals across the state. Legal conduct and professional speech, which is lawful, should not be grounds for discipline or job loss. In a state that has legalized cannabis for both medical and adult use, workers should not be forced to navigate vague and outdated enforcement regimes that expose them to adverse employment actions simply for acknowledging or discussing legal products. Now, this bill provides clarity, fairness, and due process, values which are essential to protecting workers' livelihoods. And most importantly, it doesn't weaken professional accountability. The board retains full authority to discipline veterinarians for negligence, incompetence, or misconduct, and the bill simply draws a necessary line between legitimate regulation and punitive enforcement disconnected from public policy and current law. We believe that this legislation sets an important precedent for protecting licensed professionals from unjust discipline while respecting the will of Maryland voters and the lawmakers who have legalized cannabis, and therefore we urge the committee to issue a favorable report, and we hope that the General Assembly will address the greater need for clearer worker protections against adverse employment actions around cannabis use. Thank you, Senator Lamb, for leading on this important issue, and thank you for the committee for your time and consideration.
Okay, thank you, sir. Questions for our virtual witness? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill from Senator Lamb, Senate Bill 54. That concludes the hearing. Thank you, sir. We're going to next go, Senator Washington, you're up next, Senate Bill 225. And Senator Washington, I only have one witness signed up, Winnie Carpenter. Ms. Carpenter here? Yes. Okay, Winnie, why don't you come up to witness stand, join Senator Washington, and you are the lone witnesses in person signed up for this bill, Senate Bill 225.
Good to see you. Aren't you?
Good afternoon, colleagues. I have just one person here because we did hear this bill before. So for the record, good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan. For the record, I'm Senator Mary Washington, and I'm here to present Senate Bill 225, Environment Interjurisdictional Watersheds, Flood Management. It is co-sponsored by myself and our colleague, oh, I can use the name, I don't have permission, with Senator Brooks. Maryland law has long recognized that flooding does not stop at municipal or county boundaries and has directed the Department of the Environment to manage flooding on a watershed basis. So we've done a lot of that. That authority already exists under Title V, an environmental article, and it includes our sections 5-803 and 505. And certainly, I think today of all days, we understand the significance and the importance of managing stormwater and addressing our watershed studies and adopting these plans. So building on the existing framework, members may recall Senate Bill 42, which passed out of this committee, and it codified the existing interjurisdictional flood hazard designations, okay? We clarified on the floor that it was narrow in scope and it did not require any additional work on counties. And we passed it on to the House in late February. Unfortunately, it did not receive a vote in E&T. So Senate Bill 255, which is before you today, is substantially the same as that version that was amended from feedback from the department and as it was favorably reported. The only substantive update is the addition of the Patapsco River watershed, so that Maryland's flood management laws clearly and consistently reflect how flood planning is practiced. So as a reminder, 225 consolidates existing watershed and hazard statutes. What I wanted to say is that last year, Patapsco Watershed, the organization here, did ask to be added. I thought, for clarity, that we would just stick with the existing law. However, we recognize that storms are becoming much more frequent, flood risk is increasing. I've worked with the department to really think about or continue the work about flood impacts, that they originate upstream, and that we already do have existing rules that require watershed analysis. So the addition of the Patapsco is warranted because it's a clear example of why the clarity matters. And the Catonsville Flood Solutions Organization, it makes up residents of West Baltimore County and surrounding counties, and they try to educate people about flood hazards. So the organization had asked to be added to last year's bill, as I said, and their hopes is that it would help coordinate flood management among Howard County, Baltimore County, and other counties. So to provide you with evidence, the Patapsco River, as you know, has a long and challenging history of flooding. All right, so I'm giving you some additional reasons why we should add the Patapsco, just recognizing that I don't need to relitigate something we already passed with regard to existing law. Okay, so if you review what's called flood inundation mapping, and that comes from NOAA, it really does show significant impacts along that river. For example, near Catonsville, significant flooding has occurred repeatedly. Between May and July alone, the river rose between 14 and 16 feet on more than 7 occasions. So, to be clear, this bill does not change zoning law or land use law. It doesn't expand FEMA floodplains, or it doesn't affect insurance or impose new permitting requirements. Any permitting authorities related to flood management already exist in current law. But what we do is strengthen coordination. I believe it can reflect our existing law and practice in recognition that flooding doesn't stop at municipal and county lines. And again, to bring it up there, it exists in different places in code, so to bring everything together. So for these reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report. Yes, thank you.
Let's take testimony from Ms. Carpenter, and then we'll take questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Winnie Carpenter, and I speak today on behalf of the Oella Catonsville Flood Solutions. Our community group is in favor of adding Patapsco River to Bill number 225, Interjurisdictional Watersheds Flood Management, and we wish to thank Senator Washington and our Senator Brooks from District 10 for sponsoring this bill. Our group is supported by Anthropocene Alliance, the nation's largest coalition of frontline communities fighting for environmental protection, and they have stood by us as we struggle with approvals for development in our watershed on both sides of the river. We have submitted online testimony, so I will not repeat that, but I do wish to emphasize our position. When you hear the word flooding in Ellicott City, the deaths that occur, and the infrastructure that is damaged, most people immediately think of Howard County. However, because Oella, our mill town, has no post office, we are also Ellicott City, 21043, and we also flood in Baltimore County. We request that the state and subdivisions coordinate flood management activities with all related programs and include the Patapsco River watershed. And we'll give one example. Howard County's approach to the most recent flooding in 2011, 2016, and 2018 was to demolish 4 shops on Lower Main Street, build retention ponds, and construct a mile-long, 18-foot diameter tunnel that outfalls actually into Baltimore County. Baltimore County's approach on the other side of the river was to approve a redevelopment by adding 4 floors, waiving forest buffers and open space, and widening Frederick Road, all in a floodplain where flash flooding has occurred. We are both Ellicott City with very different approaches to environmental protection, infrastructure damage, and safety. We are hopeful that this bill will take us one step closer toward greater coordination between the state, city, and counties for flood management to avoid future deaths in Ellicott City. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions for the sponsor? Yes.
I had something on here.
Yes,
footnote
Senator
on here.
Brooks.
First, I want to give a shout out to Winnie Carpenter. She's from my district. And in summary, the bill designates Carroll Creek, Gwynns Fall, Jones Fall, Herring Run, and the added Patapsco River as interjurisdictional flood hazard watersheds. It mandates that flood management plans for these areas be reviewed and approved by MDE as a single unified plan rather than breaking it up and fragmenting it. So it's one single unified plan. So that's the purpose of the bill. Thanks.
Any additional questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 225. And Senator Brooks, we're going to go next to you, Senate Bill 165. And I'm just going to call up a panel of folks who all signed up on this bill, favorable or in some cases favorable with amendments. So is Drew Schmidt, there she is. Why don't you come up? Ellie Bassett, Alex Butler, Ryan Nagy, and Eddie Harrison. Sir, by my count, 5 witnesses. There are 5 seats. We do have 1 virtual witness as well and 1 unfavorable, but this is the panel of favorables and FWA favorable with amendments. So Senator Brooks, Assembly 165. The floor is yours, and then each of you are going to be on our clock, though, okay?
All right, thanks, Chair. Chair Feldman, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to testify on Senate Bill 165. For the record, I'm Senator Ben Brooks, representing the 10th Legislative District in Baltimore County. SB 165 addresses a growing but largely untracked public health and environment issue in Maryland. Failing septic systems across the state, aging infrastructure, and changing rainfall patterns and historically misplaced systems are causing septic failure that contaminates groundwater, nearby waterways, and in some cases, residents. I'd like to note that this bill is not new to the committee. SB 165 was heard last year and passed out of this committee in the same posture. The House sponsored from last year worked diligently with opposition to address their concerns before the bill crossed over to the Senate, where those same parties supported the bill as amended. The bill passed the full Senate floor before being held up by sine die. We are reintroducing it unchanged because the underlying problem it seeks to address has not gone away. And in many communities, it has become more urgent. Currently, Maryland does not systematically track failing septic systems proactively or inspect them. As a result, failures are often only addressed after significant environmental damage has occurred or when residents are already facing serious health risk and financial hardship. Yeah, SB 165 takes a measured and driven approach. It begins by improving transparency and information gathering, allowing the state and home buyers to better understand the scope of the septic system failure. This is not about imposing new burdens, but about ensuring Maryland has the basic tools needed to protect public health, safeguard our waterways, and alert homeowners before problems escalate. By advancing this bill, Maryland can take a proactive step toward preventing pollution, strengthening the environment, environmental stewardship, and addressing a problem that disproportionately impact rural and underserved communities. For these reasons, and I request a favorable report on SB 165.
Okay, let's take the panel, then we'll take questions. Why don't we start right here, and we'll just go down the row, okay?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Drew Schmidt-Perkins. I'm representing Matt Geckel of Back River Precast and a member of Team Septic. He is homesick, and we're very glad he's keeping his germs there too. So I'm going to fill in for him. Matt, over the years, has regaled us with tales, just stunning tales about what he sees on site visits as a septic builder. These tales are why Senate Bill 165 is so urgently needed. Examples like finding out that a house has a cesspool, not even a septic system. It gets better. Finding out there's no system at all, just a direct pipe out to the nearest waterway. Commonly finding systems that are clogged with items that should never be flushed. I'm looking at you, flushable wipes. There's even systems that are improperly designed, maintained, installed. All these systems are out there and risking our public health and our environment. His stories go on, and I don't tell him half as well as he can. But one of the things he always says is finding these systems, these problems early, saves the homeowner money, saves the environment. Finding these problems early means that nearby wells are not contaminated and the public health is protected. Team Septics really appreciates all the time that this committee has put into the issue of septic systems. It's not one that we often want to think about. Flush and forget is real. And this situation that we're dealing with now is the next step in helping to improve the septic situation in Maryland. Thank you.
Okay. Give us your name for the record.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Ellie Bassett. I am the Southwest Road Riverkeeper, a local riverkeeper that works to protect and restore our local waterways, also a member of Team Septic. I'm asking for a favorable report on SB 165 quite simply because it will improve local waterway and improve our public health. Like many other water keepers in the state, I run a bacteria monitoring program every week during the summer so that swimmers have the educated knowledge on if it's safe to swim or not. What we're testing for is a bacteria that is an indicator of E. coli or fecal contamination, aka poop in the water. When you swim with high amounts of poop or E. coli in the water, you or your pet can become at risk and become ill. Often you see this type of bacteria spike after rain events, think dog poop on the beach coming in, but we have many sites that are consistently high regardless of rainfall. That is indicating groundwater pollution from potentially nearby sources like septics. Anne Arundel County has stated, quote, better maintenance of private septic systems will result in lowered coliform and bacteria counts in our rivers, end quote. But this is not a unique problem to Anne Arundel County. According to the Maryland Integrated Report of Water Quality, we have added 52 new fecal bacteria impairments in 2024. That directly impacts where we can harvest shellfish, where we can safely go swimming. We've wisely targeted our large wastewater treatment systems to ensure that we're meeting water quality and public health standards, but we need to start addressing septic systems more holistically. The comprehensive evaluation of system response, lovingly known as the CSER report, clearly notes that we need to do more work on the non-point source point source sources, which includes septic systems. The best way to catch a failing or improperly functioning system is through inspection. This bill is modeled after a similar well inspection requirement, and it's a smart move towards protecting human and environmental health. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Butler.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Alex Butler, Maryland Department of the Environment. I had no idea this afternoon that I would be indoctrinated as a honorary member of Team Septic. I know some other members of the committee have received this award, and I know Delegate Stein in the House calls it an unholy alliance, so I suppose I'm a honorary member today. But once again, Alex Butler, MDE, in support of Senate Bill 165. We supported the bill last year, which made it all the way through the House, this committee, and was minutes away from passing third reader on sine die. The department views 161 as a simple consumer protection bill designed to ensure there is some attention to these systems before it becomes a responsibility for someone else and a larger concern. This is a backstop that should help identify some additional issues without additional burdens to homeowners. With that, we respectfully request a favorable vote on Senate Bill 165. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Eddie Harrison. I'm the legislative liaison for the Maryland On-Site Wastewater Professional Association, or MALPA. We support SB 165 with amendments. MALPA was formed in 2000 to advocate for the on-site wastewater industry, promote education and professionalism, and protect public health, consumers, and the environment. On-site wastewater systems begin to degrade as soon as they are put into service. Property transfer inspections are essential because they assess system condition, identify problems, and help determine remaining service life before failure or replacement. I've served on the MALPA board since 2012. For many years, MALPA and Maryland Department of Environment staff have discussed whether septic tank pump out should be required as part of a proper transfer inspection. MALPA's inspection training is clear that a proper inspection must include a pump out. While some MDE staff have supported this concept, the agency has never formally adopted it, and MALPA does not believe this issue will be resolved through regulation alone. Accordingly, MALPA respectfully requests 3 amendments to Senate Bill 165. First, require that the pump out be coordinated with the property transfer inspection. Second, direct the state on-site wastewater professional board to develop policy for how to treat advanced treatment units. And third, to allow an exception for properties undergoing redevelopment. With these amendments, MALPA fully urges a favorable report on Senate Bill 165. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, sir. Put that mic close here.
Thank you to the committee. My name is Ryan Nagy. I'm the owner of Spec Home Inspections. We started in the on-site wastewater industry in 2010, performing on-site property transfer inspections. That launched us into on-site wastewater industry, providing every on-site wastewater service but pumping in Maryland. I'm here to support SB 165 with amendments. The on-site sewage disposal, inspection, and pump out need to be performed at the same time, and this is crucial for several reasons. The current MDE approved education literature states that in order to perform a proper on-site property transfer inspection, a pump out must be performed during the inspection. There are deficiencies that you cannot see or determine if it's not pumped out at the time of inspection. Some of these are tanks leaking, root intrusion, cracking, baffle condition, or even visually seeing backflow from the outlet baffle that can significantly indicate a potential deficiency. You want to have a system pumped out during the inspection for consumer protection. Your current constituents will be better protected from inaccurate diagnosis of on-site sewage disposal systems condition due to an inspection and pump out being performed at different times. And with regards to any on-site sewage disposal system that has an aerobic treatment unit or BAT, they should be exempt from an automatic requirement for a pump out. These units should be, and many are required by the state to be maintained by a certified operations and maintenance service provider. These service providers maintain the unit on a regularly scheduled basis and through proper maintenance determine when the unit should be pumped out. Pumping these units out at specific time intervals when not necessarily can upset that ecosystem and can actually cause damage to the units if they're pumped out and not properly backfilled. So we ask for a favorable report with amendments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Senator Brooks, the sponsor, or any of the panelists? We're going to start with Senator Hester.
Senator Brooks, thank you for the bill. You're working with one of the best teams in Maryland here, Team Septic. I was just curious how the team felt about some of the amendments that are being proposed. And it seems to me like it would be a simpler bill if you put the pump out and the inspection together as one service. So I was curious if you could comment specifically on that. And then also, if you could describe the process of a property transfer inspection as it relates to the pump out.
I'm happy to take the first. So I would say I don't think Team Septic disagrees with the amendments. I think that nor do the sponsors. We had a good meeting with MDE. We saw the amendments come in and we had that discussion and we discussed whether it would be better to be amendments or figured out in regulation with MDE after the bill is adopted. And that's the way that I'm not going to put it on you, Alex, but that's the way that we left it at with the department, and we would defer to the department on the best way to do that. I think we completely understand that absolutely some systems it needs to happen at the same time, and some systems are specialized and may require different things than a pump out.
And so is there a regulation-making process in the bill then that would attempt to do that, or are you just silent on the topic?
I don't know that.
Are we silent on the topic of having pump outs and the inspection at the same time? It's not as clear as some folks would like it to be. And yeah.
So is there a part in the bill, could you point me to the part in the bill where the MDE is going to do regulations to cover the different instances, or is it not?
I think that I'm passing that to them.
We have not seen all amendments yet, but I believe that some of these concepts may be able to be addressed by regulations. We are currently in a process with the board. We'll get back to you on that. Thank you, though.
Any additional questions for Senator Brooks or the panel? Okay, seeing none, we do have one virtual witness sign up favorable. Emily Ransom, is she on the? Okay, Ms. Ransom, we're gonna get Ms. Ransom on here, and then we do have one unfavorable witness we're going to have to get to. Okay. Ms. Ransom, we're going to need your video. You got to put your video on. There you are. Okay,
All
Emily.
right.
You're on the 2-minute clock, and you've signed up favorable on Senate Bill 165, so you can proceed.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, members of the committee. I am Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action here in support of Senate Bill 165. Maryland has come a long way forward in how it addresses septic systems and pollution, and this is building on that forward progress. So in 2021, you all passed the requirement to license the people conducting property transfer inspections of septic systems. And then in 2022, you built on this parallel legacy, requiring inspections of drinking water wells at property transfer. Or every 3 years for rental properties. So this bill is really trying to model what is already happening on the ground. And it builds on the legacy by requiring that at a time that a property changes hands, an inspection happens. For most property transfers, a septic inspection will be required by your mortgage company. So this is really, going to be more different for rental properties. And then the less common circumstances where a mortgage either is not involved or it's a mortgage lender that's not requiring an inspection. And we know that this approach works. In Michigan, a couple of counties did something very similar. They implemented ordinances requiring inspection at property transfer. And in the first 6 years of implementing those ordinances, they found 1,000 failed septic systems and 300 homes without any system. So making sure that our systems are working, making sure that we have systems is a critical public health, environmental, and consumer protection initiative. So we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Ransom? Okay, seeing none, thank you to this panel. We do have one witness, Mr. Castelli from the Realtors, signed up unfavorable. So, Bill, if you could come to the witness stand. And since you're the only witness unfavorable, we'll let you give you the time you need to present, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Bill Castelli on behalf of the Maryland Realtors, and we are opposed to the bill as drafted. We appreciate the intent of the bill and making sure parties understand what their septic system does, have an ability to inspect. But we do believe that that should still be negotiable by the parties, and that the parties should be free, like other items in the real estate contract, to determine whether they want to do an inspection or not. Mr. Harrison mentioned like one of the items, for example, if a property is getting redeveloped, but there are other instances where a buyer may come in, they know they're going to put an addition onto the property that will, potentially affect the system moving forward. So they may choose not to do the inspection, knowing that they're likely going to have to upgrade the system anyway. So I think a disclosure, I think the industry would be more supportive of, where it's disclosed to the parties that they have the ability to conduct an inspection if they want. And then it's really up to the parties to decide what to do after that. So that's what the industry would prefer, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have them.
Okay, questions for Mr. Castelli from our Maryland Association of Realtors? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 165, which brings us to our final bill of the day. But we do have, let's wait on the sponsors. Senator Lewis Young is en route. But in the meantime, let me call up her sponsor panel. In person, I've got Aisha Dickerson. Is Ms. Dickerson here? I've got Wayne Pacell, Daniel Ash, and then we also have a couple of virtual witnesses. Let's just wait a minute or two for Senator Lewis Young to arrive to present the bill. She again is en route.
She has the intros.
Dan, you'll start us off. You start us off after Karen. Dr. Dickerson.
Senator, we are on Senate Bill 181, which is the final bill of the day, but also the one with the most witnesses. So you take the time you need to present Senate Bill 181. We'll go to your panel. You've got your in-person panel here, and then you do have at least one virtual sponsor panelist, and then we'll take it from there. Senator Lewis Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nice to see you all again today. This bill will be a bit more low-key than the other one. That's a promise. This is also a bill that you've heard in the past. I think we've heard it now for the third time. It is a bill to transition away from lead ammunition. Now, the bill isn't exactly the way you heard it before. We have worked with multiple stakeholders, including leading members of the hunting community, to come to important compromises. We'll talk about those compromises today, but since the first introduction of the bill, certainly the timeline has been extended. And one of the things you heard in the past is there just isn't non-lead ammo available for certain kinds of firearms. So we have exempted those from the bill. Before I get into the central points of my testimony, I want to emphasize that this is not an anti-hunting bill. It is not an anti-gun bill. This is a very, very pro-health and safety bill. And so I'm going to concentrate my remarks on the health consequences of lead ammunition. It's among the most toxic elements, and it doesn't break down or biodegrade. The ingestion of even small quantities of lead threatens to deliver a whole range of negative health impacts on people, especially children and pregnant women, and unborn children, obviously. In most developed countries, lead has been banned from gasoline, paint. I think somebody here knows about that. Water pipes and various household items. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services banned lead shot for waterfowl hunting in 1991. So since waterfowl hunting is a major sport in the eastern part of our state, we have been living with this restriction for quite a while. Lead ammunition is now the greatest unregulated source of lead that is knowingly discharged into our environment. While the exact percentage of deer killed with lead ammunition is not precisely known, available research and agency reports suggest that more than 90% of deer killed in the United States are killed with firearms that use lead-based bullets. Over 40 states, including Maryland, operate game meat donation programs associated with food banks. The proportion of donated ground venison packages detectable with lead fragments ranges from 10 to 25%. So several states with these food donation programs have actually tested the donated venison and found these numbers. Specifically, our nearby neighbor, a study from New York, found that 19% of venison packages donated to New York food banks contained lead, with one sample containing up to 617% of the FDA's interim reference level for children. Notably, some lead contamination samples had no visible metal fragments on X-rays, showing that even radiographic inspections can miss dangerous contamination. Maryland Food Bank does not do any testing at the suggestion of the vice chair. We did reach out to them. Thank you for that idea, and that's why we did some research on other states that actually do. For adults, chronic lead exposure increases the risk of cardiovascular disease, kidney damage, and reproductive problems. In fact, I spoke with a well-renowned cardiologist who is a constituent of Senator Hester, who reaffirmed the cardiovascular risks. Name is Dr. Manuel Cicada. Lack of food safety standards for unadulterated donated food increases risks to low-income recipients who are already disproportionately affected by elevated blood lead levels. The annual human costs of lead exposure include 5.5 million premature adult deaths from cardiovascular disease and 1.4 trillion in losses in the global economy from lead impairing children's cognitive development. Copper and brass bullets are available in virtually every rifle and handgun caliber. Copper or brass bullets ballistics are similar to lead, while weight retention during penetration is usually superior. In fact, the U.S. military is transitioning to non-lead small arms ammunition under its Green Ammunition Initiative. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has stated the best available science and sound professional judgment indicates that lead ammunition and tackle have negative impacts on both wildlife and human health. A 1225 publication by the Center for Humane Economy entitled Lead Ammunition Imperils Wildlife and hunting families cited over 54 studies and articles. And in fact, virtually we're going to have the author of that article testify. Now, I'm including a few references to this because I saw in the oppositional testimony a statement that there is no documented scientific medical evidence that lead and ammunition causes health problems. I'm not going to read the title of all 54 articles to you, but I do want to cite 4. Lead bullet risks for wildlife and humans. lead levels in New York donated venison, poisoned wildlife and tainted meat, why hunters are moving away from lead bullets, a hidden danger in donated game meat. These are only 4 of 500 peer-reviewed articles on the danger of lead. Given the known health risks, the proven ecological harm, and the availability of safe, accessible, effective alternatives, phasing out lead ammunition in deer hunting is a practical and scientifically supported step towards protecting public health and sustaining healthy ecosystems. Now, you will see in your opposition testimony that this move is going to decrease hunting. There's no real evidence of that. Particularly in California. There's some data that looks at California's numbers, our numbers, no correlation in terms of decline. And in fact, after California's legislation was enacted, there was actually an increase. But to some extent, yes, hunting is declining, but for totally other reasons. The drive towards urbanization, aging demographics, hunters are aging out, limited access to land, and living and shifting cultural attitudes. When I visited my hometown in north central Pennsylvania, I happened to meet up with the daughter of one of my high school classmates. Big hunting area. In fact, first day of hunting was a school holiday, but yet when I took Yom Kippur off, it was an illegal absence. So that tells you how important hunting was. So I met with one of his children. He had 3. None of them hunt today, despite the fact that their father was an avid hunter. So my point is there are other reasons for the decline in hunting. Despite a slight increase in participation during COVID, the overall trend in hunting is just down. So I want to shift now to my panel because they are all experts on specific topics that I've referred to very briefly. And I want to give you a little bit about their background so that you can refer questions accordingly and understand where the expertise comes from. Mr. Dan Ash, who is a hunter and a Maryland resident. He's currently president and CEO of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. He's had a 22-year career with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as the director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And he was previously chief of the National Wildlife Refuge System. Mr. Wayne Pacell, he is also a Maryland resident and president and CEO of the Center for a Humane Economy and the Animal Wellness Action for the last 17 years. For almost 14 years, he was also president and CEO of the Humane Society of the United States and the chief crafter, architect of California's policy of no longer allowing non-toxic ammunition in that state. Dr. Isha Dickerson, she's also a Maryland resident and associate professor of epidemiology at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Medicine. She's tracked several studies on the impacts of toxic medicals. So she's going to speak on the medical effects. And finally, virtually, Dr. Dickerson, who also has a PhD in epidemiology, and he is the author No, I'm sorry. That's Dr. Keene, who's going to testify virtually, also with a PhD in epidemiology. He's the author of that article that I mentioned that is attached to my testimony. So with that, brief introduction of my panel. I'm going to pass it on to the experts.
Okay, do you have a sequence? You want to start with Mr. Ash? Right. Okay, Mr. Ash, welcome. Each of you are going to be subject to the clock here, so it's a 2-minute clock. And so, Mr. Ash, you can proceed.
Good morning, or good afternoon, Chairman Feldman and committee members. You have my written testimony. Lead is a neurotoxin. There's no safe level of exposure. You'll hear about the vulnerabilities to young children and women of childbearing age. Use of lead ammunition contaminates game meat and gut piles left in the field. It's a risk to human health. It causes the death of untold numbers of scavenging animals, including bald and golden eagles. Non-lead ammo is readily available in all commonly used hunting firearms. It's affordable and it's effective. There's zero evidence linking modest increases in ammunition costs to declining hunting participation. Zero. In 1991, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, my former agency, ended all use of lead ammunition in all waterfowl hunting. I'm a waterfowl hunter. I've been a waterfowl hunter for decades. I've spoken to thousands of DU members at DU dinners and banquets and meetings. I know hundreds of waterfowl hunters. I have never spoken to a single hunter who has said they've stopped waterfowl hunting because they have to use non-toxic ammunition. Hunting participation has been steadily declining in the United States since the 1970s because people like me are hunters. We're getting older. We're dying. But there is no, those are due to other social and demographic factors. It is not related to the cost or the price of ammunition. Passage of SB 181 will not reduce Maryland's federal wildlife restoration grants. That's tied to the overall sales of arms and ammunition in the United States, which creates an excise tax. Those are going up by orders of magnitude. Everything we know tells us it's time to get all of the lead ammunition out of hunting. Please issue a favorable report on this bill. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Dickerson, do you want to go next? Or?
We'll move this a bit closer. There we go. So to the chair, vice chair, and committee members, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to discuss an issue that's important not only to Maryland residents, but to the United States as a whole, and that's the removal of lead from ammunition for hunting. So I'm an associate professor in the Department of Epidemiology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. I've spent my entire career studying the hazardous impacts of heavy metals on human health, and that includes lead, which is a notorious neurotoxicant. We know that it impacts cognition in childhood, but also carries on into adulthood and on into older age. The CDC recognizes that no level of lead is safe, and we've taken measures to remove lead from gasoline and from paint, but one that it seems we've forgotten is lead-based ammunition. I was born and raised in Alabama in a family of hunters, so I am keenly aware of the amount of game meat that hunting families eat. The thing about lead is that even after an acute exposure, it can replace calcium in bone and deposit there, re-release throughout the entire lifehood, especially during pregnancy and in earlier age. As it remobilizes, it reestablishes itself again in the brain. So, with that being said, I want to make sure that everyone here understands that it's not just this one point source exposure, it's a continual cumulative exposure that can impact health as well. So I implore the committee here to vote in favor of SB 181 to remove lead from hunting ammunition, because protecting human health protects the future and the productivity of all of Maryland residents.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Purcell.
Yes, hi, Wayne Pacelli with the Center for the Humane Economy. When I came to Maryland 35 years ago, there were about 25,000 deer being killed a year. Now it's close to 80,000. The problem of lead dispersal in the game meat has tripled in severity. Think of this, someone goes out and shoots a deer. They dress out the portion of the animal that's the edible portion. They take it home to their family and their friends. They leave the other half, what the so-called gut pile, in the woods. They're both consumed. Dozens and dozens of species consume the gut pile because there's no waste in nature. The lead is heavy, but it's soft. It fragments into thousands or tens of thousands or millions of fragments, and also lead dust. Those animals are documented to die. 130 different species are documented to die from lead poisoning. Then it goes home. And it's one thing if a hunter wants to take his or her chances in consuming lead, which is known as a toxin for 3,000 years. But we're giving it to the spouses, we're giving it to family and friends and to food banks. If you think of 10 million hunters in the United States, perhaps giving venison to at least 60 million Americans. Food banks are getting enormous volumes of venison donated to them. Minnesota, a huge hunting state, says, no, we're not going to take this anymore because of the lead content. There's no broader dispersal system for lead than sport hunting. 10 million hunters across the country are spreading lead over 1 billion acres, half the land acreage of the United States. And I want to just note, finally, on the ammunition issue, when the Fish and Wildlife Service stopped lead ammo use in waterfowl hunting, you had to go to your local gun store. Now you can go to online retailers. The United States is your marketplace. You can get it within a couple of days for any species, just about any caliber of weapon. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's take questions for this panel, and then we will take some of the virtual witnesses you've signed up as part of your sponsor panel. Yeah. In person? Yeah. Oh, okay. Are you talking about Dr. Keene? Yeah, let's bring on Dr. Keene, who's part of your panel, and take his testimony, and then we'll take questions. Yeah, you got to turn it. There you go, Doctor. Okay. You're on the 2-minute clock. You signed up favorable. You're part of Senator Lewis Young's sponsor panel, so you can proceed again on Senate Bill 181.
Okay, thank you so much, and good afternoon, Senators. I've been a veterinarian for 38 years in livestock practice, in veterinary research with the USDA, and at the University of Nebraska Veterinary School as faculty. I'm currently at the Center of Humane Economy, a colleague of Wayne, and I live in South Dakota. So in veterinary medicine, lead is a well-studied toxin. It causes neurologic damage, gastrointestinal disease, renal failure, and death in wildlife, livestock, and pets. And just as in people, there's no safe level of lead exposure for animals. And veterinarians routinely treat raptors and scavengers suffering from lead poisoning after the hunting season. It causes paralysis, seizures, extreme weakness, and these are painful, often fatal conditions. And treatment is difficult, expensive, and often unsuccessful. When a lead bullet or a lead shot strikes an animal, they often fragment into hundreds or maybe thousands of pieces, many of them microscopic, and these fragments contaminate the carcass, the gut piles, and the meat that create a toxic exposure pathway for scavenging wildlife and for people who consume the game. Now, I did a back-of-the-envelope calculation, and I estimate that Maryland deer hunters and their families consume 100 to 200 tons, yes, tons, of lead-contaminated venison each year, with a much greater tonnage of lead-contaminated carcasses and gut piles spilled onto Maryland's rural landscapes. The ammunition performs well, but so do modern non-lead alternatives that do not introduce a potent neurotoxin into the food web. Maryland's waterfowl hunters adopted well when still shot replaced lead shot in 1991, so SB 181 legislation is doable. In veterinary public health, we prioritize prevention over treatment. When a toxic exposure is predictable, avoidable, unnecessary, the standard of care is to eliminate it, not manage its consequences. Continuing to allow lead ammunition for hunting when effective non-lead alternatives exist makes no sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. So we will take questions of any of the panel. We'll start with Senator Washington. We'll go to Senator Brooks next. Senator Washington.
Senator Lewis, thank you so much, Louis Young. Thank you so much for this bill. I'm honored to pass it. I appreciate you bringing this as much as the rooster caged bill. I want to recognize my constituent, Dr. Dickerson, and I really appreciate you being here. And every time someone from my district comes, I go, I have such great constituents that are involved. I was going to ask questions about the gut pile, so I didn't get to show my knowledge of hunting, but I will ask Dr. Dickerson, having come from, a family of hunters, there's the gut pile, so I think we understand what you're saying is that it's not just bringing this one piece of meat home, that basically anything else that is hunted also that's in a particular territory would also be exposed to lead, right? So that's true. So even if I'm not using lead bullets and someone else has used lead bullets, then the animals that the squirrels or just whatever that I'm attempting to shoot, I'm having a hard time saying these words, as you can imagine. That's also contaminated. That's correct. That's what you were mentioning.
You
can.
To me, Senator. Yeah, thank you. So this booklet that Dr. Keene formulated, which is cited, has dozens of citations, has a picture. You can't see it, but we do have copies for everyone. This is an X-ray.
Well, I guess I wanted to just, I'm trying to ask a question, so I just wanted to make sure I understood what you were saying. That a single bullet, okay, that is lead.
Okay, could you pull the mic?
Because of the gut pile, the practice of, that means field dressing, that dealing with it in the field, that it's a way of spreading. So I wanted to ask Dr. Dickerson about, are there other ways, or to elaborate more on perhaps particles, lead particles, or other ways in which the lead can spray in a single shooting activity?
Yes, absolutely. So lead residue can spread not only to the hands from the person who shoots the ammunition, but also to the area surrounding where the ammunition was fired. So I think what you were asking was if any wildlife in that area become contaminated from that lead. Yes, so any lead fragments, any lead dust that they come across can also accumulate in that animal. So as you were suggesting, if someone were to eat squirrel, which some of my uncles and cousins do, they would also consume some level of lead from the carcass of a squirrel that wasn't necessarily shot with lead-based ammunition.
And we are accustomed. We have made tremendous success in our state in lead reductions in housing and paint, was your point. So I don't think the magnitude of the contamination of the spread through this source is fully appreciated. So in particular, you were talking about women and calcium and bones. Could you talk a bit more about the impacts and maybe give us an example and take us through from the shooting, the hunting event, to the family, to the child? Just could you walk us through so we can visualize that?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So as a lead ammunition bullet enters into an animal, those lead fragments, they disperse. And even as the animal is dying and their heart is beating faster, those lead particulates can travel through the blood. They deposit in both the muscle and the organ tissue. So if any of that organ tissue or the muscle tissue is consumed, so you think maybe stewed venison, but even more so with ground up venison, anyone who consumes that is then consuming the lead contaminated meat. The more they consume it, the more it accumulates in the body. Well, the thing about lead is that it can replace calcium in the bone. Any receptors for calcium can be replaced with lead instead of the calcium. That, of course, can lead to low bone density. And as someone ages, that lead can be re-released into the body. But even more so in the third trimester, if anyone here has had a child, you know that you have trouble with your teeth. That's because calcium is leaching from your teeth, but it also leaches from your bone. Well, if that's not calcium that's being leached, what is being leached is lead, if that's what was stored there instead of the calcium. So when that lead is re-released, it is then exposed to the unborn fetus in the 3rd trimester.
Clothing as well. So even if you don't consume, that no one in the household consumes the meat, I believe you're also suggesting that the particles can attach to clothing.
Absolutely.
How far does it spread? In other words, if I live near a state park or if I live near a hunting and I'm not even participating, in hunting, again, no hyperbole, but just really exactly how far can dust particles spread?
It depends on the person who is contaminated. So we like to think that people wash their hands frequently, but per the COVID pandemic, sometimes that doesn't always happen, right? But we also suggest that people remove those contaminated clothing before they come in the home. That, of course, keeps the family from being exposed from the particulates that were on their clothing. But again, even if you remove that clothing, if you're eating the meat, you're re-exposing yourself anyway.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Let's go Senator Brooks, then Senator Harris.
Thanks, Chair. Senator Young, thanks for the bill. And panelists, thanks for the education. Precision. One of the knocks is that say the non-lead ammunition is less accurate than the lead. So some of the stuff I read shows that field trials indicate that modern non-lead factory loads provide sufficient precision and that for big game hunting. So why is it that there's this myth out there that the non-lead alternative is not as accurate as the leaded?
Do you want to start there?
Sure, Senator. Hunters are, hunting is a culture. People are used to what they're used to, all right? And so introducing something new, it's a conservative culture, and we often resist. But the ballistics of copper bullets are in many respects superior to lead bullets. I went caribou hunting a couple of years ago in Alaska with my son. We were hunting with 2 people. They were shooting lead. My son and I were shooting copper. I shot 1 bullet, killed 1 animal. My son shot 2 bullets, killed 2 animals. And they were just as dead as the animals that were killed with lead ammunition. And so I think in some respects, it takes time. And that's where I think this bill in Maryland is important, because it's important for states to take a leadership position and ask their citizens to be better. And I am a hunter. I'm a passionate hunter. This is my goal here, and the goal of this bill is not to end hunting, but the future of hunting is going to be determined by people who aren't hunters. And we need to ensure that the tradition continues to be one that's respectful and safe and understandable to all people. And using lead ammunition is not.
I just wanted to add, if I might, that when the Fish and Wildlife Service was considering the prohibition on lead ammunition waterfowl hunting, the argument was you're going to have a higher crippling rate, that the steel shot would not kill. You can see from Dr. Keene's report, there are studies that show a lesser crippling rate with the steel shot compared to the lead shot. The U.S. Army has developed the copper bullets. The major rounds that are used are copper because it kills better. That's the purpose of it, and that's why the Army, which is in the business of utilizing weapons with great effectiveness, has shifted to that. And lead is just dirty. It gets all over your hands, and we've kept it out of other industries for good reason. Here's an industry where the purpose is consumption. If you're painting with a lead-based paint, you then have to pick stuff from the wall. That's not the purpose of it. If you're handling toys that had lead, that's on your hands. This is a use where you're ingesting it. You're ingesting the lead. There's no more direct pathway for lead poisoning than this.
And Senator, if I could, I'm sure in the next panel, you'll hear some people tell you there are some weapons that it can't fire effectively in, and that's why The senator has amended her bill to say if effective cartridges are not commercially available, then the DNR can exempt those weapons.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, let's go to Senator Harris next.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that, Mr. Chair. And sorry if someone asked this question already, I had to run out to another committee. But one of the things that I found interesting in reading the testimonies, one of the opposition's testimony and the question, Mr. Ash, is, you know, when you read in the testimony for the Congressional Sportsmen Foundation, you know, it says that there will be an effect and a reduction of Maryland revenue due to lead ammunition bans, the negative impact to hunter participations, and ultimately funding. And then the letter says that currently over 113,000 licensed Mariner hunters, but implying that the number will go down as a result of using non-lead ammunition. And when you look at the graph that's shown here, obviously the numbers has been going down for a bit. In 2013, it's 120,000. 2025 is at 113,000. Can you respond to that?
Yes, Senator, thank you for that question. I think as the page 6 of my testimony indicates, and as I said in my testimony, hunting participation has been going down in the United States since the 1970s, and that's due to a variety of social and demographic factors, not the affordability of ammunition. And as you can see in that chart, in both Maryland and California, hunting has been in decline well over the last decade. That's going to continue. But as you can see with California, actually post-COVID, and there are certainly a lot of reasons for that, participation actually jumped in 2023. That was after their lead ammunition ban was in full effect. So as I said before, there is zero evidence that that ammunition costs drive participation in hunting. As a hunter, the things that are more expensive to me are the clothing that I wear, the hotels that I have to stay in, the gasoline that it takes for me to drive, you know, where I'm going. There are much more expensive facets of being a hunter and engaging in hunting, and the price of ammunition. As I said, I've never talked to a hunter who said, I'm not hunting anymore because ammunition is too expensive. And so the evidence that you see in that table reflects that.
May I just add one thing that, you know, waterfowl hunting, which was one of the biggest commercial forms of hunting in Maryland, stopped with lead 35 years ago. Deer hunting is the big thing here. The point of deer hunting, if you talk to a hunter, is one shot killing the animal. That's maybe 10 cents, 25 cents, at most 50 cents more for that one shot. You're talking hunting licenses, and you're talking the array of other elements of the hunt. This is a negligible non-issue, in my opinion. On the broader issue of funding, the Pittman-Robertson Act funds the states through an excise tax on guns and ammunition. This excise tax applies to all weapons. I'm not a hunter, Dan is a hunter, but we have 10 firearms in our home, and we pay those taxes. The amount of revenue from Pittman-Robertson from hunters is probably about 15 to 20%. It's gun owners and general ammunition purchasers that are funding those agencies. This is a completely non-issue. We saw it in California. We saw it with the national policy on waterfowl hunting that applied to Arkansas, Alaska, Michigan, states with much deeper, richer traditions than Maryland has.
And Senator, if I could, too, the Pittman-Robertson program that brings wildlife restoration grants to Maryland is funded by an excise tax, about 11%, on firearms and ammunition sales, all firearms, all ammunition. That fund has been exploding since like 2020 because firearms and ammunition sales in the U.S. have set records. And so, again, the idea that that this bill would drive a decrease in that revenue in Maryland or anywhere there's no evidence to support that.
Thank you.
The chair stepped out for a meeting. Senator Harris has a question. You're done. You're good. All right. I see no other questions. We do have another witness here in person, so why don't you all stick around if you can? If not, Susan Miller from Earth Justice. Are you in the room? I think that's an in-person person. Ma'am, are you Susan Miller? Okay, I'm not seeing Susan Miller coming. We do have some people online. So Lemuria, so we have Elaine Leslie, Ted Williams, Deborah Merskin. Are you in the room? Mark Pokris. I think that's an We will take each of you in order here. And let's also add Riley Rochong. Riley, if you're here. And then we'll shift to unfavorables. So if we can start, Elaine Leslie, if you're in the room, you may begin your testimony. You'll have 2 minutes on the clock.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Do you have another device on? Is that why you're echoing?
Not sure. Let me check.
You must have maybe a phone and a laptop on. If you can mute one of them, that would be great.
Please hold. I'm so sorry.
Should we pivot to someone else while you figure that out, or are you good?
Let's try this. How's that?
Oh, that's good. You're perfect. Thank you so much.
Sorry about that.
Welcome. You're good.
Dear Chairman and members of the committee, I'm Elaine Leslie, an executive member of the Coalition to Protect America's National Parks, caring for America's most valuable natural and cultural resources, many of which are located right here in the state of Maryland. In my career, I've worked as an NPS scientist, an agency chief of biological resources. I'm an experienced wildlife biologist for over 45 years. I've been working on the impacts of lead to wildlife since the mid-90s. I've worked in collaboration on this issue from California condors to bald and golden eagles, from the West Coast to the Midwest to the Atlantic coast. I've held dying condors and bald eagles from the impacts of lead ingestion from discarded gut piles and rushed other birds to veterinarians for the painful treatment of chelation. Some animals recovering, some not. Our collective concern today is certainly Maryland's wildlife, but also the human risk factor, as you've heard. There's so much we may not know about what humans are facing from meat ingested of spent lead and hunted game carcasses. However, there's definitive science and a plethora of studies and peer-reviewed publications on the impacts to wildlife. For humans and wildlife and the environment, no amount of lead is safe. We do know that. Lead phase-out efforts is a solid first step. Today, Maryland can focus on the long game, aligning your efforts to achieve larger, more meaningful results that take time, turning concepts into action. This requires strategic thinking as presented in this bill. Maryland will be demonstrating responsible, humane, ethical, and meaningful conservation actions and leadership in the state and be a model for the nation. No policy is perfect, no conservation systems are. But by passing this bill, Maryland and its hunting communities are moving forward intentionally with an eye on its natural resource conservation future. I respectfully urge the committee to issue a favorable report on SB 181. Thank you for your time and listening today.
Nicely done on the timer. Thank you, Ms. Leslie. Next up, Ted Williams, famous baseball player. You're welcome.
Hello.
Come on in.
I'm a lifelong hunter and journalist specializing in wildlife. I own 12 guns and a permit to carry high-capacity concealed weapons. It baffles me why so many of my fellow hunters insist on poisoning wildlife, themselves, friends, and families by using lead ammo when the expense of swapping to a more efficient copper bullet for a season would amount to something like a coffee and 2 donuts. Even non-toxic 22 caliber rimfire ammo is now readily available. Multiple studies find links between human consumption of lead-killed game and spikes in lead blood levels. CDC reports even low lead blood levels can negatively affect a child's intelligence. Health departments of North Dakota and Minnesota impounded 17,000 pounds of hunter-donated venison contaminated with lead fragments. The Minnesota Department of Agriculture x-rayed 1,029 commercially ground venison burger packages, finding lead fragments in 26%. 48% of ground venison packages analyzed in Illinois were contaminated with lead. Ammo companies develop copper bullets not to protect wildlife or humans, but to kill game more effectively and humanely, and they do. The toxicity of lead ammo is ancient news. George Bird Grinnell published the warning in his Sporting Weekly Forest and Tree, quote, "Until they reach the gizzard where the wild fog grounds its food, these pellets do no harm. But when reduced to powder, they become a violent poison." The year was 1894. Thank you.
Okay, yep, okay. Thank you, Mr. Williams, for your testimony. Next up is Deborah Merskin. Is Ms. Merskin here? Not seeing her. Why don't we go to Mark Pokris? And if Ms. Merskin comes in, we will take her testimony if she comes in shortly. Mr. Pokris, you have up to 2 minutes.
Yep.
Welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Williams, for your testimony. Next up is Deborah Merskin. Is Ms. Merskin here? Not seeing her. Why don't we go to Mark Pokris? And if Ms. Merskin comes in, we will take her testimony if she comes in shortly. Mr. Pokris, you have up to 2 minutes. I am here. Thank you, Mr. Williams, for your testimony. Next up is Deborah Merskin.
Okay, we're having a bit of a tech issue. Mr.
Thank
Pokris,
you.
then
This
Ms.
is
Merskin.
Mark Pokris. I should tell you that
We go to Mark Pokris. And if Ms. Merskin comes in, we will take her testimony. if she
yeah,
comes in
this
shortly.
is Mark Pokris, and I have to say we're having a technical issue
Yes,
in
Mark,
that
can
there's
you-
terrible feedback, and Deborah Merskin is also,
Tech issue.
yeah.
Then Ms. Merskin.
Okay. Mr. Pokris, I think you need to mute something. Let's go to Ms. Merskin. And why don't you mute yourself, Mr. Pokris?
Okay, I hope you can hear what I'm saying because I'm getting.
Great, thank you. Ms. Merskin, why don't you go ahead, and then we'll hopefully fix Mr. Pokris's challenge.
Mr. Pokris, I think you need to mute.
Ms. Merskin, you're up, 2 minutes.
Yourself, Mr. Pokris.
Okay, I hope you can hear what I'm saying because I'm getting.
Okay, I need you both, please, to turn off YouTube in your background, because that's what's causing the echoes.
Fix Mr. Pokris's challenge.
Yes, I'm hearing a lot of that too. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, just need to make sure that we're not hearing you twice.
Okay, well,
Ms. Merskin, you're up, 2 minutes.
thank you. There's not much I can say that hasn't already been said, but I am,
Yourself, Mr. Pokris.
Okay, I hope you can hear what I'm saying because I'm getting.
Ms. Merskin, you need to mute your YouTube or close the window.
Causing the echoes. Fix Mr. Pokris's challenge.
yeah. There, how is that?
Bless you. Thank you. Now, 2 minutes, one time through.
Okay, thank you very much. Hi, I'm Deborah Merskin, and I am a professor, but I am also a volunteer in the Wildlife Hospital. And I am mostly wanting to speak, although we can't for a second minimize the human health effects. We need to also emphasize what happens to wildlife. And Elaine mentioned this as well in her experience there. And as a reminder, lead also seeps into the soil, it seeps into the groundwater, and as we know, there's no safe level of lead. What I want to emphasize here is what I have seen firsthand in a wildlife rescue and rehabilitation hospital, which, as Wayne mentioned, over 130 animals and birds are impacted by the ingestion of lead. But just to keep in mind and bring into your mind's eye the image of an American bald eagle, literally spread-eagled, if you will, face down in the middle of a road, because they're so neurologic, they're so emaciated, they're so unable to stand because they've fed on a gut pile. And this applies to golden eagles and owls and any of those species that we know and love. But in this particular time, important to bring that image of that bald eagle who's dying out there. It's very rare to be able to rehab them. Rarely can they be saved. And what also is being impacted then is the future of that species. And we saw what happened with the California condor, almost losing that bird. And we could very well likely lose these other species of eagles and so forth because they're removed from the breeding population. When they're gone, they're gone. And we're increasingly seeing that. There's no safe level of lead. We know that. And we know the research it has on human health. It also has on wildlife health, who rarely can be saved. I respectfully urge the committee to issue a favorable report on SB 181. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Merskin. Mr. Pokris, you're up. Why don't you unmute and just make sure that YouTube isn't on in the background, and you may begin your testimony.
Thank you so much. To the entire committee, I appreciate your patience with this, and thanks for the information on YouTube. As the previous testimony has stated, there's not a lot I can say at this point. I think with Dan Ash's testimony and Dr. and Dr. Dickerson's, and even earlier testimony today, I listened to the testimony on Bill 203 that Ruth Ann Norton gave on lead paint, and we're talking about the same thing here. We're talking about lead from various sources getting into the environment and getting into a wide variety of different species of animals, including people. And we can't divorce the discussion of human health from the discussion of animal health and environmental health as well. I'm a wildlife veterinarian. I've been working on the lead issue for over 40 years. I lecture frequently at medical schools of public health because of this overlap of lead and because of the multiple sources of lead. I have been a lifelong hunter. I don't hunt anymore, but I certainly was brought up that way. I still do a lot of fishing and come into contact with lead. Of course, these days, I won't touch lead if I'm not wearing gloves. Too much adheres to your skin. I don't want any exposure as I age for many of the issues that Dr. Dickerson was talking about. And as a veterinarian, yes, I see a lot of lead poisoning in bald eagles, in loons, in golden eagles, in a variety of other species, including songbirds, a lot of backyard animals, but I've also treated lead poisoning in dogs and cats and cows and horses and a wide variety of different species. There are no vertebrate animals that are immune to lead poisoning. Lead is a universal toxin, and it's a bad one. Dr. Dickerson talked, I think, very wisely about some of the effects on children and women of reproductive
Pokris,
age.
if you could wrap up your testimony, please.
Sure.
The timer went off.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear that. I apologize.
Oh, good.
Anyway, thank you for having me. I'm honored to participate in this. I think this is an important bill, and I think Maryland can take a leadership role.
Thank you, Mr. Pokris. Riley Rochong, it's good to see you. Welcome. You have up to 2 minutes, and you are our final favorable witness.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. I'm sorry I can't be there. I'm preparing for a trial tomorrow over in Montgomery County, so I unfortunately cannot join you today. I am testifying on behalf of the Green Healthy Homes Initiative. While this is not a bill that is directly related to housing, this obviously relates to the issue of lead. And we care very strongly about trying to address, especially unaddressed or unresolved sources of lead, such as what this bill is doing. Now, as the previous testimony kind of said, there's not a lot that I can say to add to this point. What I do want to mention, though, is that this is a real issue, and it does affect even the people who we help, not only from people who hunt their own game meat, but also people who receive donated game meat from programs such as that run by the National Rifle Association that donates millions of pounds of game meat to local shelters every year. One particular study I wanted to draw the committee's attention to, because as the Senator and others have mentioned, there's a wide body of evidence showing that this is a real issue specifically affecting game meat. There's also a really notable study from 2008 out of the University of North Dakota School of Medicine, qualitative and quantitative detection of lead bullet fragments in random venison packages donated to the Community Action Food Centers of North Dakota in 2007. Very relevant. What they did was they looked at a sample of 100 packages of venison, and using various methods, they were able to find that over half, 59 of the packages that they looked at, tested positive for lead. The study also includes, if you want to look it up yourself, specific diagrams. Here, they were actually able to scan and find the particular lead fragments using high-definition computed tomography imaging. And they also went through specific samples and were able to find it that way. So we do know that it affects people. We do know it gets in there. This is something that we need to address as a state. So we would urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Riley. Are there questions for any of the online witnesses? Seeing none, we thank you for your time and your testimony. We're going to shift to the unfavorable witnesses. So in person, Nicholas Andraka, are you in the room? And Kaylee Leager, Kathy Wright, Sean Beck. Those are our in-person opponents. Glad you are all here. Welcome to Annapolis. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your testimony. You'll each have 2 minutes. Did I miss one more? Hold on. Got it. If Bibi Frederick is here, we're going to put you at the table. And Lindsay, I see that you're here. Why don't we wait and we'll bring you both up. Bibi, why don't you wait a second, Mr. Frederick? Sorry. The four of you all may begin your testimony in any order. You each have up to 2 minutes. We can just take you down the line if you like. Please be sure that the microphone is close so that folks watching at home can follow along. Thank you.
Committee, I am Nicholas Andraka from Calvert County, Maryland, a DNR hunter instructor and lifelong hunter. I consume 5 to 10 deer a year with no detectable lead in my blood. I oppose Senate Bill 181. This is the third year this hunting lead ban has been proposed. The sponsor partners with some of the most prolific anti-hunting groups and personnel to craft and support this agenda. Yet they have rejected and proposed 80% reduction in lead ammo use. This year, they added a section, the DNR shall authorize use of lead ammunition if non-lead ammunition is not commercially available for a specific weapon. This is a false sense of security for those who have a rifle that does not function properly with copper cartridges. Because as it reads, if there is one non-lead cartridge available, that is your only choice, whether it functions in your rifle or not, or is safe. The hunter is the only one be able to determine if a cartridge functions properly in their particular rifle, and rifle bullets are not birdshot. Lead in the environment is a localized issue in Chesapeake Bay region. It is from industrial and military contamination. In July 2025, Maryland's own DNR published a report titled A Soaring Success, Maryland's Bald Eagle Population Recovery, without single mention of lead. If anyone in this committee was serious about education and reducing the use of lead in hunting to address their perceived concerns, they would read my written testimony about a group, the North American Lead-Free Partnership. This is a group made up of wildlife biologists, hunter educators, agency leaders, and conservationists, and it strongly advocates education and voluntary use of copper ammo, not mandates. Multiple state agencies that partner with them in Arizona achieve up to 80% voluntary use of copper. This is a $0 path for the state. For those reasons, I oppose 181. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and honorable members of the EEE Committee. It's an honor to be here in front of you all today, especially before dinner time, so I'm glad it was a short bill hearing today. My name is Kaylee Leager. I'm the Assistant Manager for the Mid-Atlantic States with the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. In addition to my professional introduction, I will note that I'm a generational Marylander, avid hunter, and longtime hunting license purchaser. I'm here again in opposition to the attempt to ban on hunting-lead ammunition, which we see here in Senate Bill 181. In the sake of time, I will point out that I submitted a letter of opposition that relays the sentiment of my previous year's testimony that still stands today. CSF encourages the state and the DNR to implement voluntary incentive-based programs for non-lead alternatives only if there is state-specific demonstrable science-based evidence that such an effort is needed to address population-level impacts of lead exposure in wildlife, in specific wildlife species. To touch on the previous panel's talk about the Pittman-Robertson Act and how the federal excise tax is, distributed. Hunting license sales are a part of that equation. It's not just the federal portion of it. They have a specific equation where hunting license sales are looked at in the state, and then it is submitted to the states through that specific equation. And then in closing, I recently was in my local gun shop. I asked them if they had any non-lead hunting rounds available, and they did not. But I do appreciate everyone's time. Again, glad to be here, and I will yield to the next person.
Thank you, Ms. Leager. Sean Beck.
Good afternoon. Chairman Feldman, Madam Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. My name is Sean Beck, and I am an avid hunter and angler and a resident of Howard County for the last decade. I'm a participant in Howard County's very successful deer management program, which recently finished our most successful year in the program's history, no doubt due to efforts from the Howard County delegation's bill in 2023, although I preferred Senator Hester's version that did not pass. I come before you today to testify in opposition to the proposed Senate Bill 181. The text of this bill makes a number of claims based on conjecture or takes claims made in legitimate scientific studies and extrapolates upon them to reach a particular end. While I would like to address these points, I only have 2 minutes, and so instead we'll focus on a practical consequence of this particular legislation. While big game hunting has become the focus of the hunting world, small game hunting is still a popular pastime for outdoorsmen. The shotgun is a popular choice for many hunters, but others, such as myself, opt instead to use a rifle when pursuing game such as the eastern cottontail or the gray or fox squirrel. A variety of calibers exist for this purpose, but ask most hunters their caliber of choice for small game, and you will inevitably hear .22 long rifle. In the last decade, to my knowledge, only 2 entirely non-lead ammunitions were offered for the .22, one made by CCI, which was discontinued specifically because of its ineffectiveness and inaccuracy, and the other made by Norma, which was discontinued at one point but is now currently being sold and still suffers from the same reliability concerns. I have 10 different .22 long rifles. None of them can shoot that particular brand of ammunition reliably. The text of this bill would require me to change from my well-tested and accurate lead-based ammunition to an entirely unreliable and inaccurate copper ammunition. This will negatively impact my personal hunting experiences, but also those of other small game hunters, which often includes youth hunters being introduced to this very American tradition. I urge members of the committee to have an unfavorable report on this bill.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee members. I'm Kathy Wright. I'm from North Beach, Anne Arundel County. Full disclosure here, I am a member of the National Rifle Association Board of Directors, but I am here speaking for myself. I oppose Senate Bill 181 and respectfully request that you become acquainted with the research available from Hunt for Truth. I provided you with this information in my written testimony, which includes links to websites, research, articles, and studies, and other reference materials for you to preview. The research presented by the Hunt for Truth Association has raised serious questions about the purported causal link between traditional ammunition and lead poisoning and our mortality in, for instance, California condors and other wildlife. In 2007, the California legislature passed legislation banning the use of lead ammunition in the condor range. But now, despite the California Department of Fish and Wildlife records showing a 99% compliance rate by hunters with the ban, a comparison of pre-ban and post-ban blood lead data from condors in their range indicates that the incidence of lead exposure and poisoning remains static or has increased slightly. Activist researchers are ignoring the presence of numerous other non-ammunition lead sources that are common in the environment. As you've spoken, lead-based paint, gasoline, pesticides, microtrash, and even hardware, screws, nuts, bolts, washers, and the like have all been shown to be available and attractive to condors. These items have appeared not only in their nests, but also in their digestive tracts and in their fledglings. And if I could just point out, NRA has seen an increase in hunting, interest in hunting, especially among women.
Thank you, Ms. Beck. Are there questions for the members of this panel? Senator Croza.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and thank you to the panel also for your patience at the end of the day here. I have two questions. One for Ms. Leger. As you were going through your testimony, you mentioned the word voluntary, and so I'd like you to kind of flesh that out a little bit. And then my second question would be for Mr. Beck, but if there's any other hunters on the panel that would like to add a comment. One of the previous witnesses on the first panel mentioned hunting is going to be determined by non-hunters, and I just wanted your reaction to that.
Thank you very much, Senator. To go, as you mentioned, to talk about a little bit of voluntary programs. So there are other states that have implemented these voluntary incentive-based programs. For example, I believe the witness panel before me talked about New York a little bit. New York has incentive-based, so what that is it's giving usually through a rebate program. So groups will fund ammunition, non-lead ammunition to be provided to hunters. They have to apply for it. There's usually only a limited amount that is available, and what they'll do is they'll purchase the non-lead alternative, then they can send in for a rebate. Well, again, with that being limited, there's only so many resources that can be promoted. The best alternative to that, in my opinion, and the gentleman to my right here brought it up, is through the non-lead partnership program. So the Department of Natural Resources could potentially join them. It's a free partnership to join. Other state fish and wildlife agencies have done so, and it provides education information for hunters. So it provides hunters with, okay, what are the alternatives? Is this the best for you? Is this something that you would be interested in? Provides the facts on both sides and allows the hunters to make that decision. There's been success with that in the past, but again, this is completely voluntary. It gives hunters a choice to be able to do it or not, instead of doing it through a mandate through legislation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I expand on what you said?
I think we're just going to do one person per answer.
Mr. Beck.
Senator Croza, you good?
Mr. Beck.
If you could repeat your question for me, sorry.
One of the earlier panelists on the first panel said that the future of hunting is going to be determined by non-hunters, and I just wanted your reaction to that.
Hunters tend to have the best insight into the game they interact with regularly. I know for myself, I spent hundreds of hours in the woods just this year, both scouting and actually hunting for deer. You become intimately familiar with the game as you pursue it. And it can be frustrating when interacting with others who don't have that same kind of interaction, to have them potentially be the ones who pass rules or govern the way in which we can interact with those animals. And it can be frustrating, certainly in the hunting space, for me with fishing as well, to have that be the case.
Thank you, and I appreciate your continued involvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Croza. Senator Brooks.
Thanks, Chair. All right, so this could be for, I guess, maybe Nicholas and Sean. Oh, I'm sorry, Nicholas and Sean, yeah. Do you think the U.S. military is an authority on weaponry deployment, you know?
So there is no correlation between military ammunition and hunters. I believe it's the Geneva Convention bans militaries from using expanding ammunition. They are not allowed to use expanding ammunition. Every state requires big game hunters. We are not allowed to use non-expanding ammunition. So there is no correlation to what the military is using. In some cases, they're using armor piercing. We require soft ammunition. When that ammunition hits like a deer, it has to open right away. I can shoot a deer through the heart, and it goes right through it. If it doesn't expand, that deer will die about a mile down on someone else's property. If that ammunition hits the deer and instantly expands, it sends all that energy, a shock wave. As it goes through, it's going to kill the deer. But that shock wave knocks the deer nervous system out. So it drops and bleeds out in 3 or 4 seconds from that shock wave of the expanding ammunition. So there is no correlation between what the military uses and what hunters are using. 2 different scenarios.
Okay, so you're saying that the military has never used lead, is what we're
No, they use full jacketed. So it's a lead core with a full brass jacket, so it does not expand. We use, in a lot of cases, ours has a half or 3/4. The tip of the ammunition has a cup. The lead is exposed with a cup. So when that cup, called a hollow point, hits the deer, it mushrooms out instantly as it hits the hide.
Yeah, well, I can understand you say if it does not expand, but I can tell you what it does do. It tumbles, like the M16, it tumbles. You get a small entry hole and a exit hole. So what I'm saying, the U.S. military is transitioning to non-lead ammunition primarily to reduce the toxic lead contamination at training ranges, protects soldiers from exposure during training, and improves the environmental safety. And this shift includes using advanced material like copper and tungsten to create a more effective, environmentally friendly bullets that often provide better performance, such as improved barrier penetration.
Exactly, and that was my point. They can use a harder metal like tungsten. Tungsten does not expand because they are penetrating. They are not allowed to use expanding. A hunter has to use expanding material. His bullet has to expand on impact. Military ammunition does not expand, so it doesn't matter if they're using tungsten or whatever. It can be as hard as it can be. It's not allowed to expand.
Yeah, but the tumbling effect, does that not create a large exit hole? Small entry and a very large exit?
In hunting, no. It does not. You cannot use a tumbling bullet and effectively kill a deer. You kill it, but it's going to be, like I said, a couple 100 yards down. You need the bullet when it hits. I spent the last 3 years, and I have transitioned to copper in a couple of my weapons where it worked. And particularly last year, we did a hunt for the Baltimore Zoo where we had to use non-lead. There were 8 of us in this program. We started over the summer. 2 dropped out because they could not get a copper ammo, and they tried all available to group. It would not group in their rifling. They dropped out. We had 6 of us left. We had issues with expansion on 2 of them. For 4 of us, it worked great. And that's my point, is just because there's a copper bullet available doesn't mean it's going to group in your gun. But back to your point about the military. Military can use tungsten because they, by the Geneva Convention, cannot have expanding ammunition. By the game laws, we have to have expanding ammunition. And it's a good thing, because otherwise we'd be chasing deer. When your ammunition doesn't expand, it's what's called penciling. It just goes through, makes a pencil hole. That deer will die.
But what about the exit hole? That's what I'm talking about.
If it doesn't expand, the exit hole is the same size as the entrance hole. It is.
Okay, all right. We're going to have to disagree on that one. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Brooks. I see no other questions for this panel. Thank you for your testimony. We have 2 more witnesses in person before we go to online witnesses. Mr. B.B. Frederick and Ms. Lindsay Thompson. You can come to the table. Since you sat down first, Mr. Frederick, you win the lottery, and you each get up to 2 minutes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Kagan. Honorable members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is B. Frederick, and I am representing in-state and national members for Safari Club International, or SCI. During the discussions around this bill last year, one delegate asked proponents where exactly detrimental impacts, specifically from lead ammunition, are happening in Maryland, or is this just conjecture? It's an important starting point for any discussion around this issue, around proposed blanket bans on lead ammunition. Where exactly are we seeing these impacts here in Maryland? We need to focus on the science, and specifically where any impacts from lead ammo are actually occurring. And if there are demonstrable impacts, then examine site-specific and species-specific restrictions that are voluntary, educational, and incentive-based. It's important to note that lead is used commercially in several forms. The form in ammunition is not the same and is less easily absorbed by the body than the form in paint or gasoline, so we cannot continue to conflate the different types of lead. Outside of a mention for women who are breastfeeding, the CDC, FDA, EPA, the American Society of Pediatricians do not mention eating game shot with lead ammo as a potential for exposure on their websites. Simply put, this legislation is unwarranted and overreaching, and the result of prohibiting lead ammo would be a decline in hunter participation and hunter recruitment, as well as the resultant declines in conservation funding for Maryland DNR and hunting's role as a management tool, especially considering white-tailed deer. This past summer, the Maryland DNR posted an article online concerning Maryland's prolific bald eagle population recovery. The article only noted pesticides, DDT primarily, habitat loss, illegal shooting, and development disturbance as historical impacts on bald eagles. It did not mention lead ammo. New York previously opposed mandated lead restrictions in their state agency's working group because it restricts hunting access and achieves extremely minimal benefit. It said it would be, quote, challenging to advance and come with significant social cost. Thank you for your time.
You too. Good evening, Madam Vice Chair, Chairman Feldman, members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Thompson, here today on behalf of Maryland Grain Producers Association in opposition to this bill. For farmers, hunting is not a recreational activity alone. It is a necessary wildlife management tool to control deer and other varmint species that cause significant crop damage. You've heard me say many, many times before in this committee that wildlife damage costs farmers millions of dollars a year in lost revenue, and responsible hunting and use of crop damage and deer management permits are one of our only tools to manage that damage. This bill would make it harder to utilize those tools in 3 key ways. That would be cost, availability, and compatibility. A standard box of non-lead rifle ammunition can cost 2 to 3 times more than lead ammunition. In some calibers, it can be even more. You've heard that cost is not an issue, but for farmers doing crop damage, that can be different. We can shoot hundreds of rounds of ammunition in one season for sighting in and harvesting deer. Non-lead options in a .350 caliber specifically found online were anywhere between $110 and $300+ more expensive than lead options for 200 rounds. Non-lead ammunition is just not consistently available in Maryland, and while this bill would allow DNR to make exceptions for commercially available, just because it's commercially available does not mean it's readily available in Maryland. The waterfowl mandate is nationwide, and that is why manufacturers have risen to fill that need. Last is compatibility. I'll end with an example. We bought our daughter a Savage 110 this year. Our 8-year-old daughter is on crop damage duty. She got her first several deer this year, and it explicitly states in the warranty of the gun that they do not recommend non-lead, specifically copper bullets. So this would be an issue for certain firearms. Thank you.
Ms. Thompson, could you just clarify what was their justification for that position?
So they don't have a justification for not using different ammunition or non-lead ammunition in certain rifles. I can get back to you on the specific reason. I'm not a gun expert.
I'm so curious. Coke versus Pepsi. Like, why are they seeing
I think
a
it has to
difference?
do with the boring on the inside of the barrel and the compatibility for that projectile to pass accurately through the barrel.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Senator Carrozza.
Madam Vice Chair, Ms. Thompson, we always appreciate your experiences in Maryland. And my question would be, again, along the lines of, and kind of maybe tying that to your experiences in Maryland, the voluntary approach, incentive approach, and kind of the benefits of that approach.
Absolutely. So many farmers rely on, while safe and effective, older firearms in order to harvest deer and other game, right? And so not every firearm is going to be compatible with every type of ammunition. And so by using a voluntary incentive-based approach, I do think that you would find farmers who would, if compatible with the weaponry that they're using, utilize non-lead options as long as, again, it's compatible and those other options are available. Whereas if you were forcing them to use non-lead options, they would have to expend additional resources for compatible weapons as well as tracking down the ammunition, which I think can be harder for non-hunters to understand than people who actually go online and try to do it.
One follow-up, Madam Vice Chair. And Ms. Thompson, do you have any examples in other areas, not this issue, where voluntary incentive approach worked as opposed to mandates?
Sure. So going back way before my time, but it's an example I've used before for farmers specifically, before the Water Quality Improvement Act of 1998 passed, which was regulatory mandatory nutrient management, we had 90+% of the acres in Maryland enrolled in a voluntary nutrient management program. So I think that that's a good example of if it's voluntary, incentive-based, it makes sense. And there are the supports in place that farmers will adopt these practices.
Good example. Thank you.
I see no other questions. Thank you both for being here. We're going to wrap up with two more unfavorables that are with us virtually. Mark Penick, why don't you kick us off? You have up to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Mark Penick. I'm the president of Maryland Show Issue. I am an attorney and a lifelong hunter as well. So I want to bring to the committee's attention a legal issue that perhaps they have never considered, and that is how this bill would be enforced. Under 10-1101 of the Natural Resources article, the mere possession of a leaded piece of ammunition by a hunter could result in a $1,500 fine. Second offense is $4,000 fine and a year in prison. And in addition to that, the individual could also be subject to forfeiture and seizure of their firearm by the game warden. And in addition to that, their hunting privileges could be suspended for up to 5 years under Section 10-1108. So what you have is overreach of the worst kind. You're criminalizing people who have been hunting all their lives with a certain type of ammunition and firearms that perhaps that they've owned their entire lives. Now, there is a better way, and it's been alluded to. The Fish and Wildlife Services in Maryland and Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge has incentivized people to use copper bullets by actually buying the ammunition, up to 2 boxes of copper bullets or unleaded bullets, and thus subsidizing the alternative use of copper, and $25 per box for a shotgun. So there is a way, without criminalizing hunters, to actually incentivize people to actually use non-leaded bullets. We urge the committee to consider these alternatives and indeed at least lower the penalties associated with a lifetime use of leaded ammunition. I thank the committee's attention.
Thank you, Mr. Pennick, for your testimony. We're going to wrap up with John Jocelyn. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. John Jocelyn speaking on behalf of 2A Maryland. While I understand the drive behind doing the non-lead bullets, what we haven't really talked about is the collateral impact of reducing the number of hunters. Certainly this will not increase it and will probably markedly reduce the numbers as we go forward for various reasons. So what are we seeing? Fewer hunters, more deer. This is resulting in more traffic collisions on our highways, with the possible injury to the driver and to the vehicle occupants, the damage to the vehicle, additional crop damage due to fewer hunters. When we have fewer hunting licenses sold, we receive proportionally less revenue from the federal government to assist with wildlife programs. Then we have an enforcement issue. There is an exemption that the department can authorize the use of lead ammunition for firearms if the ammunition is not commercially available for the specific weapon. Now, we don't use the W word, so we're going to say firearm. That's very, very important. Specific firearm. How is a DNR going to have the resources to test each person's firearm to determine whether it will or will not properly utilize non-lead ammunition? Firearms are unique. The same firearm model in the same caliber, one may shoot a particular load well, the other may not. How this will be enforced, where the resources will come from, I can see a nightmare for the DNR as we go forward. I think we should consider what we might gain by what we might lose, and we urge an unfavorable report.
Thank you, Mr. Jocelyn. Questions for either of these virtual witnesses? Seeing none, that completes the hearing on this bill, and tossing it back to the chair to wrap us up.
It was a long day, but that completes the work for the committee this afternoon. And with that said, I'm sorry, is somebody, anything else okay? That I hereby declare our hearings for today and the work of the committee done. We are hereby adjourned.